Good morning, Kobe. We're waiting. Several people are having difficulty with the link to Zoom in, so we're going to wait till everybody gets zoomed in before we get started.
Okay, no problem. I'll just be
And
here.
we're now live on YouTube.
Good morning. I can't resist saying hello before it all gets going.
Just know we're all, it's being recorded right now. So just everyone be aware of that.
Great.
I think we're just waiting for Betty.
Good to see everybody. Great, thank you. Would you? Yeah, just because of the echo. Did you see the note in chat, Chair Grove, that Betty is present?
Betty, have you joined us? Not here. Betty, is Betty, member Stone available?
It could be. When I first tried to get in, I was not allowed in as a panelist. It was just an attendee. I'll send the link to Betty. I'll send the link to you again.
Pat's going to send it.
Great.
Right.
Pat is in the process of sending it right now.
See if that helps. Thank you.
As soon as we hear from Betty, we'll get started.
Angie, I'm not
able to get a good connection. I'm going to restart my internet here and see if I can get a better connection. So it'll just take me a minute. Go ahead and get it if you need to.
Well, I always leave my coffee mug behind at our meetings. And the good thing about a Zoom meeting is that will just mean going back into the kitchen to get it.
There are benefits. I think.
Hi, is Betty there? Okay, this is the board secretary, and I was trying to get a hold of her. We haven't, she hasn't dialed in yet, so. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Am I on? This is Betty.
And the video.
Hi, Betty.
Oh, there I am.
There you are.
Sorry, I was having all kinds of problems. Got it.
No, that's fine. Scott is too. He's redialing in. So we'll give him another few minutes and then we'll get started.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us, Betty. It's good to see you.
Kind of a frustrating last half hour. Have to settle down here. Yeah. Yeah. It's good. Thank you. Thanks, Karen.
Okay, I think we're all here. Thanks for joining us again, Scott.
Yeah, you. Sorry.
No problem. Well, let's get started. Let's call the meeting to order. I don't have my gavel. But let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I think Colleen is going to post a picture of the flag for all of us. Okay, let's get started. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all. Thank you. Before we get started, I just wanted to say a few things. This will likely be our last meeting of the year. It kind of makes me sad because I haven't seen any of you people in person since March. So it seems a little frustrating, but these are the times we're dealing with. But I just wanted to kind of thank all of you for all your work this year. It's been a strange year. We've had to figure out Zoom meetings, for example, and how to do the Pledge of Allegiance online. And you guys have really stuck in there, and I really appreciate it. I was looking through my notes for the first meeting of the year, and I was looking at the goals I had for our board, and it was to have more fun. attend more meetings, go to more state parks. And a few little things changed that, but I think we still had fun, and I think you guys did a really outstanding job. And we're still moving state parks forward. So I just wanted to thank you for that before we get started. I also wanted to just kind of reiterate what the meeting protocol is. The public will have a chance to comment on each item. If the public wants to, they have to dial *9 on your phone to raise their hand to join the webinar. Your phone must be muted, and then you will be unmuted once we're able to take your comments for the public. And before you make a comment, please state your name, city you are from, and the organization you are representing if applicable. And we will be having public comments on each action item, as well as at the end of the agenda, there's the item public comment for issues not on this agenda. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that's how this is going. And people attending can't do YouTube at the same time. So I'm being told here. So make sure you're not doing YouTube as well as this Zoom meeting. So those are just kind of some meeting protocols. With that, I think we'll start with our first item, which is approval of the board minutes. Does anyone have any changes or comments on the board minutes from our meeting May 17th? No, not May 17th. Or
October, May,
Oc- September, our last meeting.
sorry.
Does anybody have any comments or concerns? Colleen, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
Yes. I just have a couple of things that I'm going to change on the minutes. First, remember Lighthizer comments? I'm going to add in where it's in the 1, 2, 3, in the 5th line where it says at the August meeting. I'm going to add in CAC meeting. And then we're in the next line where it says encouraged members to participate. I'm going to add encourage CAC members to participate. And then on 2 lines down, where it says encourage CAC members to participate in the presentation. Oh, I'm sorry. Encourage CAC members to participate in the summer's comment period. I'm going to add summer's acquisition comment period, just to clarify that a little bit better, if that's okay with everyone.
That sounds good. Does anyone have any concerns with those changes? I think there,
Thank you.
it says May 17th on the top.
Yeah, I meant to say that too.
Okay.
Sorry.
So as long as we can check the date. Seeing that, do we have if there's no other concerns, do we have a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting?
Madam Chair,
Vice Chair Moe?
I move that we approve the minutes from the September 17th meeting as amended.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second it. This is Betty.
Thank you, Betty. All those in favor, say aye. Or how about thumbs up?
We might need public comment.
Oh, right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Minutes are approved. The next item is board member reports. Vice Chair Moe, would you like to start with your report for the last period?
Sure. Can you hear me? Okay. The Region 4 parks saw a 22% increase in visitation from January to July, and those numbers continued throughout the summer. Before we go any farther in the meeting, I think it's a great tribute to our state parks in general and to the value that they hold for Montanans, the value that we have seen over the course of this past 6, 7, however long it's been, months. And it cannot be stated strongly enough how appreciative I'm sure all the board is, and I am, of our staff who have just done yeoman service during this very difficult time to make sure that the public could get out to the parks that they wanted to visit and have a good experience there. On the Smith River, we had record visitations this year, despite an ice closure in April and the first week in May. We had 6,442 visitors total, which is 210 higher than the previous high, which was in 2019. The ratio of resident to non-resident floaters was about 3 to 1. The average group size is also a new high. 8.5 is the average group in private, and when you combine private and outfitted, about 8.8 as an average group size. The algae problems that we've been following on the Smith River Advisory Council in particular seem to be abated or not as much of a concern this summer. There were also some protocols that were changed to minimize the risk of COVID-19 to staff and to visitors. One of them that was particularly positively received is that Camp Baker was closed to overnight camping, and floater registration and assignments were completed over the phone 2 days prior to the launch. Everyone involved, floaters, outfitters, and the community of White Sulphur Springs, were very pleased with the effects of those changes. So as I have seen in a number of other areas of government, although the pandemic has provided us with a lot of perils and a lot of inconveniences, we've also learned some lessons from it and done some innovations that I think will be helpful in the future. The Sluice Boxes State Park has a new trail footbridge. Their visitation and floating have increased significantly. With popularity also comes new problems, alcohol use in the park, trash, fire rings, and as you may have read, we did have a recent death in the Sluice Boxes State Park. So there are still things that we've had improvements, but also greater management needs. Giant Springs and First Peoples have been heavily used, but the programming has had to be limited because of COVID. At Giant Springs, there are extensive irrigation systems there, which is part of the beauty of that particular park. And the winterizing last year was, I'm not going to use the adjective, but the result is that many of the pipes have broken, and there's had to be dealing with that. Black Sandy State Park, I'm pleased to report, has added a new ADA accessible fishing dock, which is very popular, wonderful addition. And I'll close my report by saluting all the volunteer organizations and individuals who have made contributions in my region. The Montana Preservation Alliance has documented historic structures and buildings in the Sluice Boxes State Park. The Ackley Lake Club continues to be very active in making that park more attractive and entertaining. They've helped the staff install new campsites and picnic tables, and they've had 2 fishing derbies. The Lewis and Clark Audubon Society has cleared the old birding trail at Spring Meadow Lake State Park. So those 3 organizations in particular, but just lots of interest in our state parks, in spite of a very challenging time for all of Montanans. That concludes my report.
Thanks, Mary. And that highlighted another issue I noted in my goals for this year, was to really work on partnerships and forge stronger relationships with the other volunteer groups. And I think your report demonstrates how we have really cemented some of that. So thank you. Member Lighthizer, do you have a board report?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Grove. I'll begin with, I've been working a little bit with the committee on the Missouri Headwaters Master Plan. As you all know, in the last legislative session, this park was moved out of the Primitive Parks Act. And, you know, we think there's a lot of opportunities for expanding visitor amenities and services in the park, but we need to do this in a really thoughtful and inclusive way with robust public participation, especially I think in light of the environmental, cultural, and historic significance of this park. I want to compliment Betsy Lebrod for leading this effort and her efforts to be really inclusive in this process, bringing in a lot of different stakeholders, even in the beginning stages of the working group process. At this point, we've broken up into some committees, and each of the committees are focusing on different elements of the draft plan. And to my knowledge, there's really not there's no funding going into this this plan. It's just park staff and community volunteers that are working on it at this point. So fortunately, we have a lot of great plans to reference, the SCORP, the strategic plan, etc. And let's see, what else did I want to say about it? Yeah, I think this is a great opportunity to create master plans at a park level. So when opportunities arise, like the generous grant from the Leona M. and Harry B. Helmsley Charitable Trust come through, we have a state plan or a parks plan at each park to identify the opportunities to move forward with. And I'll wait to Betsy's part of the presentation later on to speak to that further. The other thing I was able to participate in was there's been a lot of great online webinars and opportunities to learn about different things now that we've transitioned online. And I attended a webinar called Best Proposal Ever, put on by the Montana Access Project and the State Parks Foundation. And Michelle McNamee did a fantastic presentation on funding sources available to trail projects, including some federal programs and some new opportunities through the state. And she provided some guidance on how to prepare a great application, and there were some lessons learned from the community of Malta. And I just encourage folks to learn about those opportunities. There's an application, the application period begins on November 2nd. So for folks you can find that presentation online. You can learn about the funding sources that are available and see what's possible for your communities. So I just wanted to mention that and thought that was a really good opportunity and resource for folks interested in projects in their communities. And that concludes my report.
Thanks, Erica. Member Stone? Maybe she has to come all the way from Glasgow and tune in.
I didn't get a chance to visit any of the parks in my area this summer, or any of the other parks. I'm looking forward to doing that when things settle down and the weather is nice again. I know that the increased usage of Hell Creek was up significantly, and I believe that will be in one of our reports today. Beth has the numbers on that. Also, I've noticed that the use of the fishing access sites around Glasgow have been increased this summer also, and I know that puts an extra pressure on the staff. So as Vice Chair Moe mentioned, the staff is doing a very good job, and I too would like to commend them.
Thank you, Betty. Member Brown? You're still muted. Scott, you're still muted. There you go.
I have anything new to add, but I would like to echo what Vice Chair Moe mentioned about the park staff. In light of the how busy our parks were, I think our staff should be commended for doing such a great job in the parks open during these busy times. And that's it.
Thank you, Scott. My member report, I don't have a lot to add either. I've mostly worked with some of our partnership groups, such as the Friends of Fort Owen, our State Parks Foundation, and just some of the other proposals that we're going to discuss today that I think will cover anything I need to say. So I think with that, we'll just move right into the director's report to see what Director Williams has to say.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Parks and Recreation Board members. I will try to be brief because I'd like to give space on purpose to Beth as the Parks Division Administrator. But I do want to express and echo the steadfast appreciation for Parks staff and the impact and the role that Parks has and the role that Parks plays within the broader agency of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. I would say that Parks continues to lead in planning efforts, in facility maintenance, in its classification, in many ways that we are trying to work together as an agency to learn from some of that really strong experience. I do see a clear path forward, and that is as one agency with one vision that protects the integrity of the Montana experience outside, and very much that includes the cultural experience, or the cultural resources we steward, and the recreational and parks resources as well. I think that as Vice Chair Moe mentioned, it's very clear to all of us that these are resources that are important to so many Montanans, and certainly people beyond Montana as well. Something this summer has made clear to all of us. I do look forward to continuing to work on a team approach on a number of issues within Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, thinking about how we address recreation going forward. And with recreation, I deliberately include fishing, hunting, hiking, paddling, all of the outdoor experiences that we steward and protect the integrity of. So there are a number of ways that I'm still looking to build that team approach. So stay tuned for any changes there. I do think that we have made great strides and will continue to. I finally found a list that I made when I first started. And when I asked a staff member, how can I demonstrate my commitment to parks and integrating parks better integrating parks within our agency? And that staff member gave me a little list, and it cracks me up now because it seems so far behind us, and we've gotten, I think, so much farther. One was to host the National Association of State Park Directors in Missoula. Well, that's long gone. I enjoyed attending that, to make sure that we had parks articles within the Montana Outdoors magazine. I hope you have seen that, and I think everyone really appreciates having those articles. To have an executive order on Milltown. Well, I think that is long past due, and that we've made really great strides with Milltown. To hire a new division administrator. Thank you, Beth, for stepping up to the plate there. To even put together, much less complete, much less implement, the Parks in Focus. And I go through that pretty often to make sure we're really on track with that. And I appreciate the input that Parks in Focus gave us. And I think we are well on our way to, I would say not just well on our way, I would say it is a new day for Montana State Parks, and the future looks bright. So with that, I'll pass it to Beth, but all of this couldn't have happened, as you all noticed, without the stellar state park staff, and much appreciation to all of them and to you as board members in your leadership as we really do make these great strides. So thank you.
Thank you, Martha. I would also put that back on you as well. Your leadership and your direction are really what you are steering the ship. So I think you need to take some credit for that as well, because we certainly appreciate the leadership and direction you provided that made it easier for all the rest of us. So thank you as well. Beth, we're excitedly looking forward to your report. We know there's lots to say.
Good morning, Chair Grove, members of the Parks and Recreation Board, Director Williams, Beth Shoemate, Parks Division Administrator. And because I provided such an extensive administrator report just a short month ago, I will keep this one brief and just have a couple of quick updates to provide to everybody. But I just first want to say thank you for all of the accolades to the staff. And we talked a lot last time about some of the changes that we made in response to COVID with some of those operational protocols. And I'll just say that we had a really successful parks management team discussion last week. We had a facilitated discussion about some of the COVID silver linings and what are some of those operational protocols that we might want to retain into the season next year. So more to come on that, probably as we move towards the winter months and we really define what are some of those solutions that we actually found in response to COVID. And Vice Chair Moe already mentioned some of those at Smith River that were really well received by the general public and the local communities. So we now are turning to shutting down all of our facilities for the most part. We, of course, still stay open for a lot of day use throughout the winter months, but it is definitely a time for us to just take a deep breath and finally take some time off for a lot of the park staff around the state. And I'm just so happy that they are finally there after a very busy season. So my few updates here, I just wanted to remind everybody that we do have the outdoor recreation grant programs. We'll be soliciting applications beginning next week, November 2nd, and this will include the Federal Recreational Trails Program, as well as the new Montana Stewardship Trail Grant Program that is funded through Senate Bill 24. And we also have both of the OHV grant programs, the original one, as well as the new House Bill 355 funded Summer Motorized Trail Pass grant program opening up November 2nd. The application closing date will be February 1st for all of those. We also have Land and Water Conservation grant cycle opening up on November 16th, so not far behind. And we are changing the process there, the application process, as far as being able to have a rolling deadline. And I really give the credit here to Michelle McNamee. She was already mentioned by Member Lighthizer, and just trying to think about how can we better assist those communities in trying to provide the 50% matching contribution and the right timing that they actually can secure those matching funds for that grant program. So a really great idea to have a rolling application deadline. And so those will be March 1st, July 1st, and November 1st throughout the course of next year. And applications will be accepted by mail or file transfer. All of the other grant programs you can actually apply through the online web management grant program. And as it's already been mentioned, Michelle is already out there doing a lot of the training, technical assistance trainings across the state. And a lot of these now are available virtually through Zoom, which is really great because some of those communities can attend, I think, a lot easier than in years past. And some of those dates I just want to make sure and mention are November 5th, December 8th, as well as January 7th. And all of these dates and information is on the State Parks website for additional information. Are there any questions about the outdoor recreation grant programs before I turn to another update? Okay. So the other update that I wanted to mention is that, and Member Brown, I know that you are quite familiar with this and attending some of the Region 5 Billings area CAC meetings in the past, and it has been discussed there, but Asian clams have been found in Lake Elmo. This occurred in 2019 by some of our Fish, Wildlife, and Parks employees that were training to search lakes for aquatic invasive species. Subsequent searches of the irrigation storage reservoirs and ditches and rivers upstream and downstream from Lake Elmo found no other Asian clams, which suggests that they are only located at Lake Elmo. The invasive clams are found nowhere else in Montana to date. So Fish, Wildlife, and Park staff has recommended that it drains Lake Elmo in Billings Heights this winter to eradicate invasive Asian clams that were found there in 2019. FWP fisheries biologists and managers have completed an environmental assessment, and that is currently out for public comment. And the public comments are due on November 18th. That environmental assessment can be found on the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks website. While the lake is dry, FWP is recommending improvements to fish habitat as well as possible additions to park amenities. That would be more, and it would be more difficult and expensive if the lake was full of water. Some of these projects could include excavation to deepen the lake, handicap accessible rock jetties, sunken structures for fish, a boardwalk between the lake shoreline and Lake Elmo Drive, as well as work on the dog park shoreline and a sediment retention area. All of these projects, of course, will depend on funding and completion of engineering and planning. And in the meantime, recreationists should not be impacted during the partial drawdown during the winter months. But come April 2021, it will be filled back up to its normal level. And the complete drawdown will actually take place this next fall. At the time, the lake may not be available for recreation, depending on the alternative that is actually put into place, depending on the public comment and the decision notice after the environmental assessment process is completed. Are there any questions about Lake Elmo State Park and the Asian clam situation? Okay, well, with that is my only update. So I stand for any other questions.
Does anyone have any further questions for Beth?
Yes, I do. Just quickly, on the Asian clam in the Lake Elmo. So you mentioned some possibilities for additional work while the lake is drawn down. Do you have a estimate as far as a timeline or when we might learn more about what those capital projects could include and budgets and funding for those?
Chair Grove, Member Lighthizer, at this point, we do not, just because we're really in the very beginning phases of the environmental assessment process and trying to better understand what the public would like to see at Lake Elmo State Park and some of those recreational amenities. And until we gather all of that information and then produce a decision notice and determine next steps, that will then determine what some of those alternatives might be for some of those capital improvement projects. Then we, of course, have to make sure that we have the funding available and that we have the approval through the legislative process in order to move those forward. So as far as a timeline, it would probably be still a couple of years out.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Betty, I saw your microphone get unmuted. Did you have a question?
Beth, I do have a question on another park. It's Hell Creek State Park. Just wondering what the status is of that. The last I'm aware, the park had to deal or was notified that the concessionaire had to bring some things up to code and was notified he had certain dates to meet those requirements. And I haven't heard anything since then. Can you give us an update on that?
Absolutely, Chair Grove and Member Stone. Yes, let me do a quick overview as far as Hell Creek State Park. And you are correct, it was a very busy recreation season at the park. However, our visitation numbers, which we don't have final 2020 visitation numbers until the end of the calendar year, but it was almost the exact same amount of visitors to date as far as last year of what we saw at Hell Creek, which is right around that 30. We saw last year 36,000 visitors, and right now we're sitting right at 31,000. The capital construction project for the new 25,000 gallon water cistern, as well as the new fish cleaning station, was completed in the spring of 2020, and it has been brought up to code as far as DEQ requirements, and the concessionaire has hooked into this new water system at Hell Creek. There were a few problems in the beginning of trying to get that system up to speed, but nothing that couldn't be handled and resolved, which we have been able to accomplish. And as far as the status of some of the contractual relationships at Hell Creek, we do have our lease agreement with the Army Corps of Engineers that expires in April of 2021. The concessionaire contract also expires in April 2021. And in addition to these lease agreements, the Little Shell Tribe has also submitted a proposal to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to manage the Hell Creek site for the next term. We have also received, as well as the Little Shell Tribe, a list of selection criteria that we both need to now respond to. Both of these proposals are due December 31st of 2020, so that's right around the corner. And a selection date for the next lessee is yet to be determined. That's in the Corps' court to determine that. We do know that one of the federal conditions in the new lease agreement will be a 10-year term versus a 30-year term, regardless of who is provided that next lease arrangement. Does that help answer your questions, Member Stone?
It does. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you, Beth. Any further questions?
I guess I do have a follow-up question.
I have a question. So
Betty, why don't you follow up first and then we'll get to you, Scott.
I do have a follow-up question, Beth, and that is, with this lease agreement, will the board have any responsibility or decisions to make regarding that?
Chair Grove and Member Stone, from my understanding, this lease agreement would be approved and signed by the Director of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. And we, of course, would be updating the board, but I don't believe that it would require a board approval or signature per se.
Okay.
Director Williams, does that sound accurate?
Beth, this is Zach. Chair Grove, Director Williams, members of the board. Under the statute, the board is charged with approving all acquisitions or transfers of interest in land. A lease would be an acquisition of an interest in land. So in all likelihood, yes, we would be coming back to the board for approval of that lease if we were awarded the opportunity by the Corps.
Okay.
Thank you, Zach, for clarification.
Thank you, Zach. Any further questions, Betty? Okay, Member Brown, I think you had some comments or questions?
yes, was the past term a 30-year term with the concessionaire?
Chair Grove, Board Member Brown, that is accurate.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Beth, one thought that just came to me is that maybe you could give us a brief update on the status of Big Arm, and where we are at and in that process. I every time I see you, I forget to ask. So maybe you could give the board a quick update on where Big Arm is at.
Chair Grove, members of the board, yes, I'm happy to report that the acquisition is finalized and complete between FWP and DNRC, and we are underway as far as some additional planning processes at Big Arm State Park in order to consider some possible expansion of campsites and trail systems as well, especially on the west side of the highway. And so more to come as far as what next year and the next coming years could look like at Big Arm, but we are in the planning process of trying to make some of those improvements into the future.
Great, that's exciting. I'm glad to hear it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from the board or comments for Beth?
Yes, thank you. Now that we're on this vein, I was curious if there's an update on Fort Owen, and you could provide an update on the grant.
Chair Grove, Member Lighthizer, we on the agenda have the State Parks Foundation providing an update. And so because they were the applicant for that Helmsley grant, which is what I assume that you are referring to, I think if you can hold any of those questions about the Helmsley grant and some of those Fort Owen specific questions after Kobe Gerke, I see, is on, the executive director with the State Parks Foundation, and we'll be providing a much more thorough update as far as some of those efforts at Fort Owen. But we are happy to report that the land acquisition for the nearly 1 acre parcel is going to be signed with the landowner, the adjacent landowner, next week. So it's underway. Things are moving along.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Again, more exciting stuff. I think it reiterates what Director Williams said. We're really moving forward at this point, and it's in part to some of our great partners that we'll hear from later today. With that, we do have the Summers Beach acquisition is the next line item. It's on the agenda for 10 o'clock. I think it will be okay to start, don't you?
Yes, on the.
It's approximate times, yeah, okay. Okay, so let's move into the Summer Beach acquisition item. I did want to say a few things before we hear from the department. I wanted to remind the board that we first discussed this item in April of this year, and we approved initiating the department's due diligence process to explore the purchase of this property. And now we're at the end of that process to consider approving the actual acquisition of the property. I just want to remind you that today this is about that item specifically. We are not going to discuss site planning or scoping. I think the department did a really good job of outlining that within their record of decision, but I just wanted to remind you that. I also want to reiterate what Vice Chair Moe is always really good at reminding us is we are here to advocate for the public in this process. And there has clearly been a robust involvement from the public, as you saw in our documents that we received. There's been quite a bit of input from the public. So because of that, after the department does their presentation, what I would like to do is ask for some public comment at that point, just to get the public's perspective before the board starts asking their question. We will ask for public comment again if we make any motion for this action item, but I do think it's important that we get the public's perspective as we go through our discussion. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that. And with that, I will turn it over to Jim Williams, who is our regional supervisor from Region 1, to describe this opportunity for us. Thanks for joining us, Jim.
It's my pleasure. Madam Chair, members of the board, Director Williams, Deputy Director Temple, Jim Williams, I'm the regional supervisor here in Northwest Montana. And as you just suggested, I'll do a kind of a high flyover since you have all the materials, and then we'll go to public comment. And then we have a whole bunch of staff that this was a great big team effort. that is on the call today to help you answer questions or public questions should they arise. So I'd like to start by saying this is really exciting to be here to present a potential final Parks and Recreation Legacy Project, in particular on Flathead Lake. And as you mentioned, it's called the Summers Beach Acquisition. It's about 106 acres. As the board knows, it's just east of the town of Summers, right along beautiful Flathead Lake. It's a rare chance to preserve, access, and create new recreation amenities on Flathead Lake. And this is part of a package, and I'll talk about that in a little bit as well, but we don't get too many of these chances. And as we've seen throughout the pandemic and this summer and the crush of humanity that enjoyed our parks, our fishing access sites this summer, we can't really meet the demand anymore to access to some of our water bodies, and Flathead Lake included. You have a pretty large packet that Beth sent out. The price of the acquisition will not exceed $2.9 million based on the most recent appraisal. And generally, the funding is going to be provided by the Land and Water Conservation Fund and required matches. And that's Parks earned revenue and, of course, our general license fund. And as Director Williams mentioned, we're all for one for all. I really have enjoyed how the department has come together to fund some of these recreation projects with many sources of funding here recently. And I think it's pretty exciting. As someone mentioned already, I think Chair Grove, this is an acquisition EA, not a development. Our Region 1 Park skipper, Captain Dave Landstrom, he's on the video as well. Dave, that's an entire separate process should the board approve this as a final. So yes, this is just the acquisition. There's some other benefits besides recreation. Given my wildlife background, I can tell you wholeheartedly, this has also incredible benefits for fish and wildlife. Protection of the North Shore, waterfowl, migratory birds, and all the associated benefits with land conservation. So it's even more than recreation. We released an EA. We had staff do some incredibly diligent work, difficult work, and it was daily. We did a 30-day public comment period, and we received 135 comments, and that's in your packet as well. And I signed a decision notice that has all the details, and you have that as well, and that's a public document. There is one condition that we are the seller, the Slider family, and I'll talk about them in a little bit too, and FWP are engaged in negotiations still regarding the title commitment, some minor encroachment, final appraise value, and some boundary delineations. And of course, it is proposed to the board that approval be conditioned on the department's assent of those terms for the final. And again, as we mentioned, it would remain undeveloped until the next DA, should the board approve it, to look at what the public, what the community wants, what the state wants for development on a potential new state park. I also would like to highlight a few things. This is part of a Flathead Lake package. We actually have two exciting projects. The Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Commission just approved a new fishing access site, and it was from the Matson family directly across from Wild Horse Island State Park, Skiko Bay, right on Flathead Lake. That's a fishing access site. That goes to the land board next. This is potentially a new state park, depending upon your actions today. And both of these projects, Summers Beach and the Montebello Fishing Access Site, it's on Montebello Lane. They have broad support from both the Lake County Commissioners and the Flathead County Commissioners. So we were excited about that as well, and lots of public support, obviously. We had a lot of help with the Flathead Land Trust. Paul Travis and Laura Katzman working with the family and the department. This truly was one great big group effort. It's been going on for a long time. It's a complex and complicated project, but it's just been delightful to see it to the end. The pandemic this spring and the demand for recreation really taught us, number one, how, like everyone has said already, how valuable these state parks are and fishing access sites. When everyone else was closed, we were still open. Our staff were out there with PPE, working hard. It gave everyone a place to go to to feel normal again, frankly, when things were closed down. And those are our state parks, wildlife management areas when they're open, and our fishing access sites. And I wanted to say how fortunate we are in the Flathead Valley to have a family like the Sliders that could have sold this to anyone. They could have been condos. It could have been a jet ski park. It could have been a number of things, but they chose public access and recreation. And how fortunate are we to have a family like the Matsons that sold us in the process of Montebello fishing access site. The Matsons are from Havre originally, but long-term Valley residents in East Glacier as well. And we're hoping that Senator Blaisdell, he's excited about both of these projects, will shepherd them through the session this winter for the funding. How fortunate are we to have long-term families like the Blaisdell family? So the Sliders, the Matsons, and the Blaisdells, all long-term multi-generation families here in Northwest Montana, are providing these potential new legacy access projects. I will kick it back to Chair Grove. I just want to end real quick by saying some of the new things that can be provided on here, and it's in the EA, but it's worth mentioning again: swimming, biking, fat tire biking on sand, on snow more recently, cross-country skiing, paddleboarding, kayaking, canoeing, playing on the beach, birding, wildlife watching, or just taking in one of Montana's most impressive, largest and clean and purest lake views. That's what this park has the potential to do. It's potentially your new legacy as a board. And with that, Chairman Grove, I will stop talking and pass it back to you.
Thank you, Jim. I suspect we might ask you to talk more in the future, but we'll let it go there. And with that, I think I would like to open up and see if there's any public comment out there that people would like to make on this project before the board discusses and asks their question. And I'll remind you, you dial *9 on your phone to raise your hand, basically. And remember to state your name, city you're from, and who you are representing if you call in. And with that, I'll ask Katie if we have any members of the public that want to make comments at this time.
Chair Grove, members of the board, yes, there are several people that are dialed in with their hands raised, so I'll go through them one at a time.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone there to make comment?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Just making sure that technology is working. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Director Williams. My name is Andrea Slider-Googe, and I live in the Flathead, and I represent the Slider family. On behalf of the family, I wish to share our excitement for the progress that has been made to transition our property on Flathead Lake in Summers to a Montana state park. While our formal collaboration began in earnest only in March or April of this year, our family has had a vision for formal public access at this property for decades. For some of our family members, this process means letting go of personal dreams to pursue an outcome that provides for a greater purpose. Our family continues to stay aligned that this is an amazing transition to a state park, providing a legacy opportunity for access to one of the most amazing natural resources in our country in a way that will be enjoyed and cherished for generations to come. We really wish to express our thanks for the tremendous effort towards this endeavor that has been advanced by Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and we offer a huge thanks to a few key individuals who really took this project under their wings to bring us to this point, specifically Dave Landstrom, Mimi Wallach, Kevin Reckoff, Dylan Tabish, and Regional Supervisor Williams. Thank you. I should mention Stevie Burton as well, who fielded those 135 letters of comment. As the board knows, the site has a complex history, and we also appreciate the candid and thoughtful evaluation provided by Montana DEQ and US EPA as part of the state's due diligence. Our family is also grateful for local support as exhibited by the unanimous letter of support from our county commission and the leadership to drive awareness and context about this site from our partners at Flathead Land Trust. We continue to be humbled and amazed by the rich and abundant and thoughtful comment from members of the public through the draft EA process. Through this process, we've seen about 200 letters of comment in the informal comment period before the April meeting, and as mentioned already today, 135 letters of comment received as part of the EA process. Our family has confidence that the leaders of our Montana Parks system and the department will advance a vision for this site if you approve it with public input that provides a truly unique experience for residents and visitors to our great state. As part of our commitment, we recognize funding is a challenge, and we would like today to share a decision made by our family to support Montana State Parks Foundation with a minimum six-figure challenge grant to raise monetary support for this endeavor. And we look forward to collaborating with the foundation staff on this proposal. We also know that local support is meaningful to constituents, and we will also collaborate with Paul Travis and Laura Katzman from Flathead Land Trust on a local challenge grant, and we'll be working with the Flathead Land Trust to formalize this process as well. Again, our family is hopeful for a vote of positive support, and we look forward to moving forward with the next steps in the process and are grateful for Madam Chair's leadership and the board's support and that of staff. It's truly been an amazing journey in a very short period of time. So thank you.
Andrea, would you please state or spell your last name for the record?
Sure. My last name is Goudge, G-O-U-D-G-E.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. And I would ask that will you be available for questions once the board begins their deliberations?
Yes, and there are other members of our family on the call, as well as my brother Andrew, who's here with me, and so we would be grateful to answer questions as they arise.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Is there another member of the public that would like to make a comment?
Yes, hello. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. This is, my name is Paul Travis. I live in Kalispell, and I represent the Flathead Land Trust, partner organization on this great project. So first of all, I just wanted to say thank you to Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, State Parks, and everyone that's been involved with this process. Certainly, it's been very collaborative from our standpoint, something that is the best way to get things done, especially with such a unique property and unique project that brings so much good to our community as well as for conservation. So we're very excited to have been part of it in some small way. Flathead Land Trust has been working with the Slider family for a number of years, trying to figure out some sort of conservation outcome that also continued the public access and use of the property and made sure that that was carried forward into the future. So we're very, very excited to be at this point. We understand that it's always a challenging thing, but it's been amazing to me as to the speed and also how things have, it's really become a priority to protect this unique piece of land along the north shore of Flathead Lake. We're really excited for the community and for the people that know and love Flathead Lake and for this new access point, but also, I really have to mention the conservation values that will be protected. This property being along the north shore of Flathead Lake, which that whole part of the landscape has been a priority for Flathead Land Trust and our partners, including Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, to conserve for future generations. So we're very excited in how this ties into the other properties, including the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service protected property along the North Shore. Properties like this are just extremely rare, especially along Flathead Lake, and to have this unique opportunity come to fruition, or we hope come to fruition, is very exciting. So I just wanted to pass that along. I think Jim Williams and Andrea Slider and many others definitely spoke more about the details of this great project, but we are very excited to be at this point. So thank you very much.
Paul, could you spell your name, please, for the record?
Yes, my name is Paul Travis, Paultravis.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for
Thank you.
taking the time to join us today. Are there
Thank-
any other public comments?
Hi, this is Marcus Strange. I'm representing the Montana Wildlife Federation out of Helena, Montana. Madam Chair and members of the board, MWF strongly supports the purchase of the proposed Summers Beach State Park on the north end of Flathead Lake. MWF believes this property is part of a bigger movement to secure contiguous landscapes, and this is one of those opportunities. The property is, as you know, is part of a larger block of wildlife habitat that runs to the east. And taken together, this is a significant piece of quality wetland and lakeshore habitat for deer, waterfowl, upland birds, and numerous non-game species. Moving forward, there's not a lot of opportunities like this left on Flathead Lake, and projects like this are exactly what Habitat Montana is for. We're extremely thankful to the Splinter family for its desire to make this public land and willingness to work with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks to complete this project. This acquisition will not only allow public access to the beach for recreational use, it will also take pressure off of some of the other lakeside access sites in the area. That will relieve parking issues and also make it safer for the public. Our affiliate, the Flathead Wildlife Association, is also strongly in support of this project and wanted us to express that support. We would like to offer up some volunteer time to get this site up and running next summer and bring members to help post signs, address fencing, and any other tasks that may need help. And finally, MWF is committed to working with the department to address any issues the adjoining landowners might have with this property becoming public. We're eager to be good neighbors and ensure that the adjoining properties and landowners see this as an asset to the community. Thank you.
Marcus, could you also spell your last name for the record, please?
Yes, Strange.
Thank you, Marcus. And thanks again for taking the time today. Is there further public comment?
Good morning, Chair Grove, members of the board. This is Mark Taylor, Taylor. I am in Helena, Montana, and I am legal counsel to the Slider family. Andrea obviously did a fantastic job expressing the appreciation on behalf of the family. I would simply add one item in case it comes up, and I'll be available for questions should the board have any. But relative to the letters from the Montana DEQ and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, I would just also like to note that as a part of this transaction, the Sliders are not transferring their liability to the department for the site. That liability will actually remain with the Slider family, and I'm happy to answer any questions relative to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for spelling your name right off the bat. Are there any further public comments?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. Chair Grove, members of the board, and Director Williams, my name is Noah Marion, M-A-R-I-O-N, based in Bozeman, and I'm the State Policy Director for Montana Wilderness Association, which has local chapters all across Montana, including the Flathead region. Just wanted to offer a couple thoughts and comments. You know, it's become more apparent over the last few months how much Montanans, how much state parks really mean to Montanans. So first, I just want to express our support for the great work park staff have done to keep these parks open during these very challenging circumstances. And I also want to express our thanks to the partners, the Slider family, and park staff who have developed this exciting project. Just want to briefly express our support for this acquisition, which we believe is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to protect a beautiful piece of land and wildlife habitat and secure more public access to Flathead Lake. We are committed to providing any needed support to complete this project, and we urge the board to approve it. Thanks for your time and all the effort on this exciting project.
Thanks, Noah. Are there any further public comments?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Terrific. My name is Tom Bansack. Last name is Bansak. And I'm Associate Director at the Flathead Lake Biological Station in Yellow Bay. And I would agree with everyone's comments thus far and also say that I firsthand have seen the dramatic increase in visitation to Flathead Lake State Parks during this past year. Yellow Bay State Park is immediately adjacent to the biostation, so we get a firsthand look at the significant demand on shoreline recreation. But the topic that I wanted to bring up is keeping this land as open space and lightly developed for recreation has water quality benefits to our wonderful Flathead Lake. And people literally come from around the world to see what clear, clean blue water looks like, to visit the lake, and continued development along the shoreline puts that at risk. So keeping this as open space to the public for enjoyment has direct water quality benefits to the golden goose of the Flathead Valley, which is Flathead Lake. So I just wanted to comment on the water quality benefits because the other benefits that I know of have already been mentioned by other calls. So thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Thanks. That is a unique comment. I'm glad you called that in. Is there any further public comment?
Chair, members of the board, I'm seeing no other hands raised. There are several other people that are dialed in, but their hands are not raised. So I don't know if we want to do a reminder of how to raise the hands.
Sure. I'd just like to remind the public, if you would like to make a comment, you need to dial *9 to raise your hand. So if anyone at this time would like to provide additional comments, they can call in using that method. Katie, are we seeing any other additional hands raised?
Chair Grove, we do have one person with their hand up. They're unmuted on our end. It looks like they're able to talk, I think. Number ending in 868. You should be able to give your comment.
Hello, Madam Chair, members of the Parks and Recreation Board. This is Kobe Gerke, Executive Director of the Montana State Parks Foundation. Our offices are based in Missoula, but today I have the pleasure of looking out the window at Flathead Lake. You can see me on your Zoom screen, but I wanted to make sure we got our public comment in this way. And I just want to say that the Montana State Parks Foundation is very grateful to be considered as a partner in this project, and very grateful to the Slider family for their generous pledge of a challenge grant earlier in this call. So we look forward to doing what we do, which is to leverage these types of pledges into larger public action and to help in whatever the future of Summers Beach is as a state park or other recreation amenity. So with that, knowing that I'll be speaking later, I will limit my comments there. Thank you.
Thank you, Kobe. Any further public comments?
Chair Grove, members of the board, it looks like that's it.
Great. Thanks, Katie, and thanks for coordinating that for us. Okay, with that, I would like to open it up for board questions or discussion on this proposal. Does anyone have any questions for the department? Comments they would like to make, or questions from the public that have made comments? No one has one comment. Betty, you're not unmuted.
Madam Chair, I have a few comments or questions.
Great. Member Stone?
And I'm not sure who I need to address on this, but it regards the funding that is in the proposal. It says the price of the acquisition will not exceed 2.985 million based on a recent appraisal. And then it goes on in another paragraph to say that there's still negotiations on the appraisal. So I'm a little confused about why we don't have a price defined specifically.
Madam Chair, Board Member Stone, Mimi Woloch and Deputy Director Dustin Temple are on the call. I would defer to either one of them there.
I'm happy to answer if Dustin is not wanting to take this one.
Go ahead, Mimi.
Okay, thank you. Chair Grove, Park Board members, Member Stone, we did obtain a recent appraisal which came in at 2.985 million. I had some questions for the appraiser. He's on vacation until November 6th. So at that would be the very highest end. And if some of my questions are answered, it's either going to remain at 2.985 or it's going to be lower. We also have a recent negotiation regarding the encroachments and negotiations by the Slider family with neighbors to repair encroachments, which may mean a reduction in acreage, which may or may not affect the appraised value downward. And also the Slider family is in negotiations with one landowner for that landowner to purchase a small piece as well. And that would reduce the frontage foot by, we don't know exactly how many feet, but it's going to be an insignificant percentage, and that would reduce the value. So in sum, it's going to be at most 2.985 million. And the best case scenario is it's going to be less.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Director Williams, I'd also just add only that this is not uncommon in any of our conservation easements or acquisitions that are especially large ones and complex as we move through these types of processes for final approval votes.
Okay, and then I do have another question also regarding the funding. It says the funding will be provided by Land and Water Conservation Grant. And I'm wondering what percentage, what is that grant match?
Madam Chair, members of the board, Director Williams, Dustin Temple in the Director's Office of Fish, Wildlife and Parks. Board Member Stone, the match on land and water conservation is 50-50. And the land and water conservation funds reserved for this project were previously committed to Big Arm. And we were not able to use those in the Big Arm project due to some federal rules about multiple federal sources in the same project. So that money was decommitted from Big Arm and committed to the Summers project. The match for this, I think in your initial sheet says it's parks earned revenue. It will be general license instead of parks earned revenue. So that should the funding schedule for this project.
That was my other question. It says matching from parks earned revenue or general license fund. So I wondered if it really was an or if it was an and or.
At the time, Board Member Stone, it was parks earned revenue. This was, when we first put this together way back in April or May, after determining, the potential for the site, eligibility requirements, those kinds of things, we've determined that it's appropriate to use general license as match for this project.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Stone. Other questions from the board?
So I have a question.
Member
The obligation of the property taxes on that, on the proposed park, what is that amount? How will that be funded?
Madam Chair, Board Member Brown, the department pays property taxes on all of its fee title land, and we have a separate line item in our budget at an agency level to fund that.
Great.
What is that amount? Do you know?
Madam Chair, Member Brown, I'd have to look it up for you. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. I don't know what it would be for this parcel specifically. We'd have to probably check with the county, but like I said, I can get you that information if you'd like.
Great.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Member Lighthouser?
Yeah, this is kind of along those same lines. Dustin, you mentioned that LWCF funds that were not able to be used at Big Arm could be applied to this. Are there other high-level, high-priority infrastructure investment projects that this acquisition would sort of bump off that list? Just kind of trying to get a sense of how this might affect other high-priority infrastructure investment projects or potential maintenance projects on other parks.
Madam Chair, Board Member Lighthizer, we've structured our parks budget, particularly our water-based parks budget, to take pressure off our park-specific funding sources. So I don't view this project as an either or. Nothing that Parks has requested is coming off the list or is adversely impacted because of this acquisition. So again, the ability to use LWCF that was previously committed was never in our funding mix. And then the ability to use general license revenues instead of park-specific revenues has freed those funds up for other priorities within the Parks Division. So we've not taken anything off the list to do this project. We've not scaled anything back to do this project. Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Grove, if I might also just add a quick point there to Member Lighthizer's question as well about the maintenance portion of her question.
Certainly.
So Member Lighthizer, I just want to also clarify that LWCF funds are not eligible to fund ongoing operations and maintenance in any outdoor recreation type project. It's for acquisition and development. So just want to make sure and clarify that point.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any further questions?
Madam Chair.
Vice Chair Moe.
I have a lot of questions, and I guess I want to preface them by saying that the time frame under which we've operated has been so fast that to me a lot of things are not known, and that makes me very concerned in terms of the impacts on the rest of the system. So my questions are many, buckle up, and they are also pointed, but I want to assure all members of the board and those on the call that I'm just doing due diligence, and I'm hoping that at the end we can afford, perhaps Mark Taylor would be the person best positioned to give kind of a wrap-up comment to various of my questions. I, like other members, don't know exactly whom to address them to. Part of my confusion falls into two areas that I think have to do with the speed with which the process has culminated. And one is that in the report, the verb tense is so inconsistent that I'm not sure what has been done, what is going to be done, and what is simply dreamed about being done. And the second is that the language of the first statement, I can't remember what it's called, an EA, I think, is so enthusiastic in support of a particular conclusion that I'm just, it makes me call into question the objectivity of the report, but I can certainly understand the excitement about the project. So with that as a preface, I too have some appraisal questions. In the report, there is a statement at page 5 on the bottom that should the acquisition be pursued, a standard appraisal would be pursued to determine the fair market value. Is that what has just been reported to us as being 2.985 million? Has that standard appraisal been conducted?
Is there someone from the department that can answer that?
It sounds like Mimi is perhaps the one that's most conversant with that.
Absolutely. Chair Grove, Member Mo, thank you. The appraisal has been completed. It's not final because there hasn't been enough time and the appraiser is on vacation and hasn't been able to answer my questions yet. The normal circumstances, an appraiser will defend the figures. And that's what I'm expecting that's going to happen here. And so, but we do have a figure and we do have a draft appraisal.
And that is a standard appraisal as referred to in the report?
Absolutely. It's a yellow book appraisal, which is what we're going to need for LWCF funding. We are also going to have to hire an appraisal reviewer under federal standards to get the federal funding. It doesn't make the final appraisal that was just completed in any way invalid. It's just part of the federal process.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
I guess so. And do we pay for that appraisal? Have we paid for it?
We pay half and the Slider family has agreed to pay for half.
Okay. My next question has to do with the shore erosion project. I can't tell whether that is ongoing or it sounds from the report as though we would postpone our involvement in it. But it sounds as though it is either ongoing or that a timeline has been laid out. So I have several questions about that. From my reading, it sounds as though the property that we would be acquiring would have some 1,900 feet of shoreline that we would need to provide erosion controls for, which, you know, I tend to put things in common terms and I'm thinking, okay, so that's like 6 football fields. That seems like an awful lot of a very big project to take on and a very expensive one. So where are we with that? Would we, upon purchase, would we immediately be involved in that process and would we be expected to partake financially and otherwise in an ongoing project? I don't know whom to ask.
Madam Chair, I'd like to call Dave up. I would say that all of the North Shore properties on Flathead Lake, this, you know, it has a low level and a high level. And there are different levels of erosion throughout the lake. But yes, that is a structure that was designed effectively to work with the erosion issue. But Dave, anything to add there on history or And I know it's hard to crystal ball this in the future, what we do.
Chair Grove, members of the board, Director Williams, I'll take a swing at that one. It's a fair question. And I think perhaps Andrea Slider might have some information to add to this as well, because the Slider family has worked very hard on permitting and getting the required permits in place to do this work. And there has been some shoreline protection done by BNSF in front of the property, the footage that belongs to them. So the concept is that if we chose to do shoreline protection there, we would most likely mimic that has occurred elsewhere along the North Shore of Flathead Lake, which is it's known as a dynamic equilibrium beach. So as opposed to riprap, it's the use of washed rock that mimics a natural shoreline and absorbs waves action. I think that's still ongoing. We'd have to determine whether the entire shoreline that we would be in charge of would require that treatment, or certain segments of it that are more erosive. So it is work that we'd have to look at in the future, however.
And Dave, are there specific funding sources for that, or is that something that would have to be absorbed with the state parks budget?
If I'd like to defer that question to Dustin Temple, if I may.
Madam Chair, we would be able to use funds allocated for this in House Bill 5 to complete that work. If House Bill 5, if the line item were to be approved and pass, it's included in the number.
Thank you.
I noted in the report, one of them, I'm sorry, I can't be more precise about which one, that in fact, the erosion has to an extent been caused by BNSF's effort to build riprap or whatever they did on their site. Are they going to help with that effort on our property? Should we acquire it?
I can take that one, Madam Chair, members of the board. I don't think that would be an accurate statement. The erosion is really more a function of the fluctuation of lake level. And so the entire north end of Flathead Lake has experienced that. And so there doesn't, there really doesn't appear to be a function that the BN work has done that's accelerating erosion elsewhere. Others, that's my understanding anyway. Please, if others know otherwise, let me know, but that's my understanding.
Madam Chair, Vice Chair Moe, I would just add that we would obviously continue to work with BNSF as a partner. We've done that in many other programs, and we'll continue here, not only on the lake, but other parcels that they owned, and where we can have things that are mutually beneficial to the public and conservation. So yeah, that's kind of an ongoing forever partnership and discussion relative to BNSF and what occurs locally there on their properties.
So in terms of my concerns about the shoreline erosion and our commitment there, would it be accurate for me to summarize that we don't know how much that erosion costs, we don't know how far along we are in the project, and we don't know how quickly we would need to be able to shoulder our portion of it? All of that is to be determined?
Correct, Vice Chair Moe. Those are difficult to pinpoint right now, and they're quite dynamic, frankly, when it comes to erosion and lake levels. But yeah, it's on our minds. We know it's a cost. We know it's an issue, but I couldn't provide an answer for you right now.
Thank you. My next questions have to do with environmental concerns. Although at some point in the report, there is a paragraph that talks about contaminated groundwater on the neighboring lands that are BNSF owned. there would be an effort to continue to mitigate that contamination in the future, probably for the next 20 years and possibly longer. But then the statement is FWP would not be liable for any of that mitigation. And as I understood Mr. Taylor's comments, he also provided assurances with that respect. And yet in the EPA letter, they strongly caution us, EPA in its conclusion strongly recommends that we consult our own various people before taking any action to acquire, clean up, or redevelop the property. And their description of the whatever, I've never seen so many acronyms, I'd like to say, and I come from higher education where we invented acronyms. But the BFPP thing is something I don't understand. And it sounds as though we would need a court to determine whether we have liability or not. And so I don't know who is the appropriate person to answer those liability questions. Perhaps Mr. Taylor, perhaps someone in the agency.
Madam Chair, Vice Chair Moe, our legal team is on the call. Chief Counsel Becky Doctor and Kevin Reckoff, who has worked intimately on this project. So Becky or Kevin?
Good morning. This is Becky Doctor, Chief Legal Counsel for the department and for Parks Division. I will refer this to Kevin Reckoff, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of an introduction. He has been working with us since the pandemic, so March, and he has not even been able to be in his office for more than a day or two at a time. And so it's a privilege for me to just introduce to you Kevin Reckoff. He's been working really, really great on this project. You've already heard some kudos given to him, and I would like for him to have the opportunity to answer the questions that he's been working so intimately on. And so I would refer those questions to Kevin. Thank you.
Thanks, Becky and Chair Grove, Vice Chair Moe, board members. It is, Chair Moe, to your point, is a complicated system of acronyms. And if I could, I would take a step back to walk through this. So hopefully provide everyone a clear understanding of this. So under CERCLA, which is federal Superfund statute, a landowner is liable for the disposal of contamination or contaminated soil. And obviously FWP would not be the primary party disposing of any sort of contaminated soil or groundwater, but there is a provision in CERCLA regarding secondary disposals. And that occurs when a party comes in after the fact and say through their development efforts moves around contaminated soil or groundwater. And as a way to protect parties that come in after the fact, like FWP would here, CERCLA has various liability limitation protections for those sorts of parties. And one of them that you mentioned is that BFPP. And so that's a bona fide prospective purchaser status. And so what the EPA does is basically, and you're right, it's a court determined status. If a party can be a BFPP, that's decided by a court later on. However, what the EPA has done in terms of trying to make parties more comfortable about acquiring properties that have a history of contamination is to outline a process through which those parties can go to sort of satisfy in their mind what would constitute BFPP status in a court. And that's another acronym called the All Appropriate Inquiries Process. It's referred to as the AAI process that you'll see. And to go through the AAI process, what FWP has had to do is to contract a consultant, in this case Tetra Tech, to do an environmental site assessment. And that's part of going on that process with EPA. And so we've done that critical piece of the environmental site assessment, which I believe has been provided to the board. It's quite a report. I know it's a lot of information in there, so I'm happy to answer general questions about that as well. But to your question about ongoing liability in the minds of the EPA. And you're right, Chair Mo, the EPA was in their comfort letters, and this is well known and well established, that the comfort letters themselves are not meant to be a no action assurance. They're not going to say that they're never going to pursue an enforcement action in the future. What they're saying is that they've reviewed our general plans of turning this property into a state park. They reviewed the history of contamination and the remedial work that's been done on site, and they have a robust history. This goes back into the 80s of testing groundwater and soil around the properties and the BN parcels as well. So in terms of the liability itself, what the EPA is saying in that comfort letter is recognizing that this is a site of contamination, maintaining their enforcement authority should the conditions on the site change, and then outlining a series of reasonable steps. And there was 5 reasonable steps in that letter that the department, if they were to acquire this property, would be expected to perform. And those range from working with DEQ and EPA on development in the future, and they also go into working with BN and ensuring the public doesn't tamper with the remedial work that's been done on site. So there are a number of acronyms and processes, and I'm happy to answer any questions on that. It's a web, but I think the big takeaways here are that EPA has reviewed some preliminary site plans for the development of a state park on this property. They're comfortable with that while they maintain their enforcement authority going forward, and they always will. The EPA has assured us that the site itself is safe for public use, and that includes the beachfront area as well. So thank you.
Stay on if you would, Kevin, and if I could follow up, Madam Chair.
I would just like to welcome Kevin to FWP, and I'm thankful you're here. But yes, you may follow up.
Thank you. Candidly, the only thing I find comforting about the EPA letter is its title.
Right.
Everything else is very discomforting. And when I look at their, I think their reasonable next steps that is on page 5 of their document number 2, it says our coordination with EPA and DEQ, restrictive covenants. They may include, but of course are not limited to, excavation restrictions, well prohibitions, residential use restrictions, continued protection of the integrity of the remedial action, and consideration of the potential for vapor intrusion of any enclosed building or structure. That to me says that while we envision a certain thing that this state park could be, that even maintaining what it already is well off into the future and could be actually prohibited. Is that a fair conclusion?
Vice Chair Mo, to that point, what I would say is, and we had an internal meeting with EPA on this exact point, and EPA has represented to us that at this time, they don't anticipate putting any sort of restrictive covenants or limitations, what are called institutional controls, on the property itself. Should that change in the future, basically they left this in there as a reasonable next step to ensure that they have the ability, and that we were aware that that could happen in the future should site conditions change. But at this time, they don't anticipate that happening.
Do we have any reasonable expectation that we would be able to do any digging, any building of an administrative building, any of that?
Vice Chair Mo, yes. I think, we have had conversations with EPA on this exact point, and it's part of the reason that we did provide them with a preliminary, and I'll stress this, a very preliminary site plan, because we wanted to see if we wanted to do certain amenities like an administrative building, if it would be possible, given the realities of the groundwater plume. And EPA has represented to us and the department as a whole that is a possibility. And as long as we work with EPA and DEQ to ensure that there aren't any sort of issues like vapor intrusion, or that the groundwater plume hasn't caused further issues, that building an administrative building and the amenities that we in general proposed would be possible on this property going forward.
But they conclude at the end of page 5, after the reasonable steps, that a final determination about which steps are reasonable would be made by a court rather than EPA.
Sure, and to clarify, to take a step back, Vice Chair Mo, that would be in the determination of whether the department qualifies as a BFPP. So,
and do we want to qualify as a BFPP?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And the first P stands for prospective, right? Prospective purchaser.
Correct.
Do we stop being a prospective purchaser after we've bought the property?
Vice Chair Mo, that's a great question. And I think the important thing is that what a court would do is they would look back. There's the all appropriate inquiries process that I talked about as part of obtaining this BFPP status, that all the appropriate inquiries have to be done before FWP would purchase this property. And that's the prospective nature of this. I think a court would look back and say, what did the department do ahead of time in its diligence procedures? And I think that last paragraph in the comfort letter, the importance of that is it gives EPA the flexibility to change or add reasonable steps as the site might change in the future with the plume, et cetera. Again, EPA doesn't anticipate any of those changes at this time. They were open about that with us. But I think as these model comfort letters, as they're called, come out from EPA, that's what we were anticipating them to say.
So Kevin, are you saying that the department is comfortable with where the environmental liability is defined at this point?
Chair Grove, yes.
And is there anything that the landowner, Mark Taylor out there, is there anything he would like to add to that discussion?
Yes, Chair Grove, just a couple additional comments. One is I want to be clear that as a part of the underlying transaction, the Slider family's liability is not transferring to the department as a part of this transaction. I want to be clear as to that underlying fact. The second, just as an additional comment on the BFPP status, as I understand it in our communications and conversations with EPA officials, including their regional counsel, the other thing that is important to note that I think that gives the department additional comfort is reliance upon favorable court precedent in the Ninth Circuit in the treatment of BFPPs. And I think that all bodes well for the department. Obviously, Burlington Northern is the primary, if not the only entity that has been responsible for cleanup activities associated with the site, both their deeded property as well as the adjoining properties. And as I understand it, that will not change anytime soon based upon the agreements that are in place. So we on the Slider family side have a high degree of comfort, both in terms of the conclusions drawn by the EPA and DEQ relative to where they're at. But also, if I might, Chair Grove and Member Mo, I might call upon Andrea Slider to also provide some additional context to Member Mo's question regarding the shoreline erosion, and I'll just tee it up on a couple fronts. One is we're principally only talking about the area to the east of the Burlington Northern property to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services adjoining property to the east. So we're not really what's contemplated with what Dr. Lorang has put together does not, it's not the entire length of the shoreline, although he did take that into account in his modeling. Second is that Andrea can share the price estimates that Dr. Lorang had put together, just to give you some additional context. And also the fact of the matter is the permits are all in place for that work to be able to be done. The Slider family did not undertake that additional activity to a certain degree because it's really we view this is not how the Slider family wants to their shoreline restoration activities might be different than how the department ultimately develops the land. So we didn't want to superimpose our reclamation or remediation activities onto the department. And so I think that is in part why we haven't undertaken them on our own. So with that, I would like to call upon Andrea Slider to add some additional color and perspective to that.
Before you do, Mr. Taylor, could you clarify what you're talking about when you say that the Slider family does not transfer its liability to us? Liability for what?
So thank you for that question, Member Moe. So their environmental liability associated with the property, because they are currently an owner, their liability does not transfer in the eyes of the EPA.
I see. Thank you.
Andrea, are you available?
Yes, I am. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Super. So Mark asked me to just talk a little bit about the erosion remediation, and we have been kind of seeking solutions and vetting them for quite a long time. Prior to even discussing opportunities with the state, our family's been working with Dr. Mark Lorang, who is really viewed as the kind of preeminent expert on equilibrium dynamic beaches on the Flathead and other lakes and water bodies. As we have been working with Dr. Lorang, the budget that he put together for the project that we envisioned was about $270,000. That does include the permitting, which, as Mark mentioned, has been obtained in anticipation of those permits transferring to the state, or just the convergence of the timelines of working on this project and then having this opportunity to collaborate with Montana State Parks has, I'll describe it as collided. And so we've been working over time, multiple paths forward. But as Mark really described, what our family might choose to do could be different than the ultimate development plans that State Parks may have after its next development public comment period if this moves forward. And perhaps as we were working with the department, one of the things that both of us were concerned about was the duplication of effort and the doubling down of funds that it might take to restore in a way that would actually cost more in total than what either of us would independently accomplish. And so that is where we are, the budget that we obtained as a family. And as Mark Taylor mentioned, the scope of the project is really the property that's east of the inholding, and it is not the entire shoreline because some of that does have some protection. Although our project did include the development of a beach to the west side of our property. And again, that may be something that the department and State Parks wants to do or chooses not to do. So again, not wanting to spend money that would be in conflict of the ultimate vision for the site. I will just share that perspective as we've tried to move through this path that we've been on for a very long time.
Thank you, and thank you for your patience with my questions. Chair Grove, if you can tolerate just a few more questions, I have one more category which deals with expense.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I think is important as we contemplate moving forward with this project is managing expectations. because everyone is quite excited about, as they should be, about this project and the potential for public use. But it occurs to me that there would actually be a reduction in public use for some time. And I don't know if I'm reading that correctly, but it seems to me that in order to answer a lot of the questions that are unanswered now, we are going to have to take on the oversight of that property, which has been enjoyed / trespassed upon for some time, and we're going to have to curtail that. So my thinking is that if we approve this acquisition, we would be probably proceeding in tiers. That's TIERS for the record. And the first tier would be a do nothing phase. And I'm assuming that that's what is envisioned in the thought that we would have. The documentation has been so voluminous that I don't have the exact document that I pulled this from, but I have it in my notes that we would be spending $96,000 annually for a while. And I am assuming that would be just to make sure that the property is appropriately patrolled and that there is signage, but that it wouldn't really be developed at all. Can you tell me what those expenses are for that, what I think of as the do nothing era?
Is there someone from the department that could answer that?
I'm happy to take that one. Chair Grove, Member Moe, you're correct. There would be some immediate expenses, and I envision that there would be some temporary amenity while we go through a public scoping process to determine what the park would look like. Some of those temporary amenities might be porta potties, potentially temporary parking, as you pointed out, signage, boundary marking, noxious weed mitigation would be a part of that cost. There would be some staff time. We would hope to have some seasonal park staff that are able to establish a presence there and do very routine maintenance, such as litter patrol and cleaning up after pets, etc., the kind of things we do in parks all the time. We would also be looking for some managerial presence there. And there's also going to be some managerial time spent conducting the next process, which is public outreach, interacting with neighbors, partners, hopefully soliciting the assistance of partners in the intermediate time, which we seem to have a fair number of hands in the air that are willing to do that in the community. So it's purely an estimate, but we know that there will be some expense initially until we determine what that park would look like.
And Dave, could you talk about the time frame? As Mary said, is there going to be a period of time where there'll be no public access? And if so, how do we envision how quickly we can actually put in a temporary management structure on this site if we were to assume the property?
I can't imagine a time when we would not have public access there. We'd move very quickly, obviously this winter and spring, if this comes to fruition, to develop those temporary amenities. People are accustomed to going there and have been for decades. We're all hopeful that there are more options coming this spring. I think we saw an unusual level of use there and elsewhere on Flathead Lake because of the closure of federal sites all around. And frankly, the closure of other alternatives indoors as well. I think we're all hopeful that we won't see that identical scenario this coming spring and that the use will normalize some. But I don't envision a time when the public would be excluded, at least once it becomes, if it does, publicly owned.
Thank you.
Well, given, kind of my understanding of what we would be taking on, when people are trespassing or entering at their own risk and using that land that isn't, they are taking on the liability for their own actions. But once it's a state park, we need to provide appropriate supervision of that site. And it sounds like for at least 2 months, that's a full-time job of at least one somebody and maybe more. Given that it is being used well into the evening and that is an habitual thing. And there are all kinds of concerns that I think I have with that. I don't think, what has been just abusive parking in the past is now our problem. And we have to be responsible for providing some kind of a parking situation so to me, there are certain base level infrastructures that need to be in place before we really can say, oh, sure, you can come in. Am I wrong about that? I don't mind being told I am wrong.
Vice Chair Mo, this is Jim again. I would just add to that. We shared the same concerns, have had those exact discussions, and this isn't uncommon to any park or wildlife management area or fishing access site that we would create anywhere in Montana. So you're right on. Our enforcement division is well aware of the project and ready to jump in should the board approve this and ultimately become a state park. We have enforcement staff. That park falls within the existing boundaries of specific game wardens. And of course it's new, and there'd be an effort with not only information and education until park staff land on the ground, but in that transition, I personally envision a big I&E effort with our local I&E office, as well as
that is I&E
information and education. Public, explaining what the rules as they change, as conditions change at any park or wildlife management area. We can have floods or not, and our information and education specialists, that's all, in this case, Dylan Tabish, as his name does, is provide that information to the public. So I think it's a combination of outreach and enforcement in the interim, and then once should this work through the session and staff and operational funds are there, then it transitions to Dave's team in full. And it would be still enforcement in parks.
I noticed that the USFWS is very enthusiastic about the acquisition and betray a level of self-interest in that, and that they are going to be gaining considerably, it looks like to me, from our presence, and are anticipating that we will be doing patrolling and various other kinds of things from which they will benefit. Is there any offer of help, she asked, perhaps rhetorically, from the Fish and Wildlife Service to assume some of the costs for that benefit?
Vice Chair Mo, Chair Grove, cost, I do not know, but I can tell you we work very closely with the Fish and Wildlife Service federal enforcement agents on site already. We have a fishing access site on the east end of the North Shore called Osprey View, and this would bookmark it, the federal waterfowl production area on the west end on the Sliders property, Summers Beach. There's immense benefits to extend the biological influence of the refuge just by not subdividing. And I want to make clear to the board, as a wildlife biologist too, that's my technical background, even with the recreation and development as Dave and the team have laid out, still with that recreation footprint, there are immense conservation benefits to wildlife. So it's compatible here. It's been occurring for a long time. Yeah, they're excited. I do not know if they want to contribute financially, however, but we will work with them, and they are supporting this project.
Thank you. Do we have a number in mind for an ask to the legislature in this next session that would take care of, it sounds as though we're going to do that for the shore erosion project. And are there other basic infrastructure things that we would be asking for, and how much would that amount to?
Madam Chair, Vice Chair Mo, I think that's going to depend. If the board chooses to advance this project, it goes to the land board and they choose to advance the project, and there's some public scoping to determine what the future of the park looks like. That will determine the ask. I will tell you that there is robust legislative support for this project, and all the legislators we've spoken to are aware of the fact that we can't just buy this park and not get any more resources. We have to take care of it if we're going to own it and provide it to the public. And certainly local area legislators have expressed their support for that effort. Like I said, how much and what kind of resources we ask for are really going to depend on what the public wants to see at the park. What is in House Bill 5 is the acquisition costs and a high-end estimate for development. Doesn't mean that we will spend all that. Again, it is all contingent on the public scoping and what's determined to be appropriate at the park, Madam Chair.
So we don't know.
Not at this time,
Thank
Vice
you.
Chair Mo.
I think that concludes my questions, Chair Grove. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Thank you for your interest. Dustin, if I could just follow up a little bit on that line of questioning. One of the concerns has been the impacts to staffing, and as we've all mentioned today, we're talking about a park system that's already maxed out. So is there any plans to seek additional staffing resources for this region specifically, because we are adding to their already full plate?
Madam Chair, yes. Again, as I just mentioned, when we've talked to local area legislators about the Flathead Lake public access package, because this is one side of the package. The Montebello FAS that you heard Jim Williams represent earlier is the other side of this. And so, again, these are opportunities that don't come along very often. But again, we know that we cannot simply acquire a site and not acquire resources to run it responsibly. We have an obligation to the public. We have an obligation to neighboring landowners to make sure that we are good neighbors and do what's required of us and provide sound service to the public. So it would be our intention, if these projects were to advance, to seek both operations and maintenance funding and whatever staffing level is required to appropriately manage and operate these parks and FAS.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One, the letter that was in our packet from BNSF was dated April 1st. It was for our previous meeting, in which they had outlined some of their support and information for this project. I'm just curious if we've had any updated conversations or updated commitments from them in relation to this project.
Chair Grove, Jim Williams again. Kevin Reckoff is still on the call. Kevin has met with the NSF, and I would just add that we will continue to meet with them as opportunities arise to collaborate on projects. But Kevin, you were the last to meet formally with the NSF.
That's right, Jim. Chair Grove, yeah, to your question, we have met with BNSF multiple times over the last few months. Those conversations are ongoing. A lot was based off of how the process unfolded here before we went back to them to discuss potential access across there. There's two separate parcels, the upland parcel and the swamp pond, what's called swamp pond parcel. The upland parcel is what's been traditionally used as an informal parking lot. And so we are still having conversations with BNSF. There hasn't been resolution on that, but we're hopeful that potentially there's some sort of either parking or trail access across that, as it is a pretty big parcel in this area. Thank you.
In that letter, they did offer some financial support. Has there been any further commitment there or clarification on that issue?
Chair Grove, there has not been. I think a lot of that does depend on how the conversation's going forward, and we have a lengthy public process ahead of us regarding development, but what that looks like in the future, I think will dictate BNSF's position there.
And earlier we referred to the legislative support. We do have a local legislator who did raise several concerns to the purchase of this property. Senator Keenan noted concerns. I was wondering if anyone on staff could speak to those concerns and maybe identify how we're going to, how this project addresses those.
Madam Chair, I'll try. So we've spoke with Senator Keenan. His first, one of his concerns was budgetary, similar to questions that have been asked and answered by Vice Chair Moe about where the funding's coming from, what are the impacts to the rest of the system? Is this inconsistent with the message the agency has given in the past with regard to parks revenues and where that relates to support of the overall system? The other piece of this, I believe, is you've heard his concern was about some sort of seismic activity disturbing the groundwater plume and the liability then moving to the department for that. And I think I've heard an answer for that, but I would say if Kevin wants to address that specifically, I would defer to him.
Chair Grove, Dustin, I did actually speak with EPA on this issue. There are provisions in CERCLA and in SECRA, the state Superfund statute, that prevent liability from occurring in the event of what's referred to as an act of God or a seismic event in this way. And EPA doesn't have concerns at this time that a seismic event would cause significant changes to the groundwater plume's trajectory or movement. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I thought it might be useful as we wrap up this discussion that someone on the department staff could talk about how this project does or does not, I guess, meet our acquisition policy, the 3 criteria: the relevance, the accessibility, and the significance. I think this project offers some pretty insightful things in all of those. So I would like to hear the department's position on that.
Chair Grove, members of the board, I can try to respond to that question. And I think I'll just take it back a step just to remind everybody about the Parks and Recreation Board lands policy. Montana Code annotated 23-1-111 requires that the Parks and Rec Board does review and approve all acquisitions or interests or transfers of interest in properties or lands. And to that end, they adopted the lands policy in 2015. It was then revised in 2018 by the current board members. And it set forth certain conditions and criteria that they would consider before any state parks lands project was approved. Policy applies to 4 different categories of acquisitions: the acquisition of interest in new park lands, in holdings or adjacent park lands, easements, as well as transfer of lands or interests. The consideration of new acquisitions was directly tied to our state park strategic plan that we're currently still under. It has not expired yet. And it established criteria within the strategic plan, which is what Chair Grove just referenced, which is the significance, relevance, and accessibility of any site. The site's significance, as far as Summers Beach, is due to the fact that it provides a natural as well as scenic and recreational opportunities that is really not provided elsewhere, especially on the north shore of Flathead Lake, but even elsewhere in our state park system. And I say that because of the extensive, wide, open, flat, sandy beach that emerges, especially at low pool. This is rather unique in Montana and provides some of those recreational opportunities that we don't see elsewhere. So that's the significance aspect of this particular site. The site will also be very relevant in the fact that we anticipate being able to provide programs as well as diverse experiences, which will create long-lasting memories to Montana families of all ages and abilities, while supporting the Montana's outdoor recreation and tourism industry. So that's the relevance piece. And we also anticipate that the site will provide critical access to all potential visitors, regardless of wealth, physical ability, age, you name it. So as we assess this property and this potential acquisition, versus other public entities, we definitely have realized that the state park is the best option in securing long-term management solutions and providing additional public access. So hopefully, Chair Grove, that helps respond to how this particular site and location fits into the conditions and criteria of the land policy, as well as our strategic plan and the significance, relevance, and accessibility aspects.
Thank you, Beth. Jim or Dave, is there anything you wanted to add from a regional perspective?
Chair Grove, Vice Chair Mo, members of the board, Director Williams. I would just add, for almost 30 years, I've had the privilege of working on directly, being part of a team or supervising acquisitions of land or conservation easements. I can look back, and in all cases, the department, and in the Fish and Wildlife side, the commission, and in this case, I would venture to guess the board, it not only are there no regrets, but they're very proud of those legacies. We've never regretted these acquisitions or conservation easements, especially given what's happened over time and the popularity of Montana. They're incredible legacy projects. So while this project has its own unique complexities that are unique because of location, it's not dissimilar to all the other projects. Each one has their unique components and challenges, but we've never regretted any of them, at least that I'm aware of. It's an incredible legacy. I just wanted to commend the board for the review, the due diligence, and the consideration. It truly has been a privilege to work on those, and I think it will be an incredible legacy should the board choose to act and move it forward.
Thank you, Jim. The other thing I would like to just point out with the acquisition policy is one of the other items I highlight in that policy is we need to have resources committed or some support for any project that we consider. And I just wanted to remind the board that we have that on the table from the family today. They offered a challenge grant to the State Parks Foundation, as well as a challenge grant to the local land trust, which I think is very commendable. Both it creates a statewide perspective and a local acknowledgement of our partners there. We have had offers from BNSF. We have had offers for legislative support. And we have certainly had incredible offers from the public or from nonprofit organizations for volunteer support. So I do want to remind the board that I do think we have resource support on the table, more than I've seen in other projects. So with that, I just want to see, does anybody have any other questions that we haven't addressed?
Madam Chair, let me see.
Vice Chair Mo.
Oh, I thought I was on mute, but I'm not. Just for the record, there was some question as to BNSF's causal factor with regard to the erosion project. And on page 12 of the EA that we were presented, the statement is that the BNSF then replaced riprap along a portion of the lakeshore to protect that area where the clean fill soil was placed as a mitigation requirement. That erosion control structure likely exacerbated the wave erosion of the Slider property. So that was not a definitive statement as to whether it caused it, but we were given that likelihood as a statement in the EA.
Right. Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, I'd just like to I guess I would like to speak to what I think of the project. And then I also would recommend that we take a roll call vote on this because I think it is pretty important. I know, but just before we make a motion, I want to talk about, I do think this is a rare opportunity. As been pointed out by Jim Williams, there are a few opportunities for this. This is on a resource of Montana that's world-class. Flathead Lake is very well known. I think the due diligence process, as we've discussed today, really highlighted the information that we need to look at. It feels like department and the technical officials and the supporting regulatory agencies are comfortable with this. I think it has clearly generated a tremendous amount of interest from the public as well as the local community. There's an opportunity here for non-motorized use that is also rare on Flathead Lake. There is an opportunity to help the economic area for Summers and some of the smaller communities on that portion of the lake. And of course, there's opportunities for recreation. So I think in my mind, this is a really, really exciting project. I'm proud of the fact of how we've gone through the due diligence. I think your questions today were very relevant, very thoughtful, very insightful. It's clear, as Vice Chair Moe has pointed out, we had a lot of materials and it's clear you went through those. It's clear you gave thought to this process. So I thank you for that. And with that, I'm curious if anyone would like to entertain a motion for this project. I guess I would entertain making a motion if no one else has one drafted. I would like to move that the State Parks Recreation Board conditionally approve FWP's acquisition of approximately 106 acres of land east of the town of Summers on the north shore of Flathead Lake for inclusion in the state park system, based upon the conditions outlined in the cover sheet regarding department satisfaction of the purchase agreement.
I'll second it.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
Are we going to have public comment before we discuss?
We could, yes. Is there any public comment on the motion?
Chair Grove, members of the board, I did have a couple of people that are dialed in pop their hands up over the last few minutes and during the discussions that have been going on. So I'll go through them and unmute them.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Is there any public comment on the motion or board discussion?
Phone number ending in 293. You should be unmuted on our end, but it looks like you're still muted on your end.
Hi, this is Laura Katzman with Flathead Land Trust. It's a privilege to be able to be part of this call. I did not offer a comment earlier because our executive director, Paul Travis, did, but I realized throughout the discussion I could potentially have been a resource for answering some questions because we have a long history with the project. I've worked with the Slider family and various aspects of working with the adjacent Fish and Wildlife Service and other landowners like BNSF trying to become project partners for years and years. But we're at the point of the motion for the project. So I guess if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them. But at this point, I just wanted to let you know I'm a resource.
Laura, could you spell your last name, please?
Katzman.
Did you get the? Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Is there any additional public comment on the motion?
This is Andrea Slider-Googe, and similar to Laura, I just wanted to be available for potential questions. No comments on the motion.
Thank you. Any additional public comments on the motion?
Chair Grove, members of the board, I'm seeing none.
Thank you, Katie. Is there any further board discussion on the motion?
I do have some comments.
Vice Chair Mo?
I am somewhat reminded of my son wanting to buy a car that was quite a vintage car and quite an attractive one, and certainly would be an asset and all kinds of wonderful things about it. But also, are you even going to be able to drive it? And I have similar feelings about this because there are so many unanswered questions. And beginning with the appraisal price and what exactly we're going to ask of the legislature, what we can expect from partners that seem to me to have contributed to some of the challenges of this project and also have considerable to gain from it, that have not specified what their level of commitment is. I'm had come into this meeting thinking I simply could not support the motion for that reason. But it's just too nice a car. And I do have really big concerns about it. I have concerns about all of the unknowns that I've mentioned, and I think I've taken care to place in the record. And also about managing expectations, because depending on how those answers go, we may actually end up restricting route use for some time. And we may not be able to create even that level of public use that it enjoys now. And I hope I'm wrong about all of that. I sincerely do. But I don't want us to go into this with, it's a rare opportunity, and because there are clearly things about it that could be very expensive. But if for the habitat and wildlife reasons alone, we should buy it. If that were all that we were protecting, for me, it would be enough. And I think that if we have it in public hands, that is the best care we can take for it. I do have concerns about the making an ask like this in the next legislature. Not only in terms of what that means to the rest of the system that we've been asked to advise on, but for the rest of the state we love, because the demands on the next legislature are going to be, I'm just glad I'm not in it. So I do think, though, that we have a responsibility to continue on with our oversight. We've made a record that expresses, at least to my satisfaction, my concerns with the project. But it's just too good an opportunity to not pursue. So I am going to support the motion.
Thank you, Mary. Any further discussion?
I just wanted to share my appreciation, Vice Chair Mo, for your detailed and thoughtful questions on this. I also came into this meeting today feeling very nervous about, potential health and safety and long-term liability with, this level of contamination. But I think you summed it up really eloquently there. For the habitat and wildlife values alone for this property, for preventing even more development, even more commercialization of the North Shore, I think this is just a really tremendous opportunity. And but I really appreciate the concerns, because I share those. I like how we, as a department, it seems as though there's a very stepwise and thoughtful approach to this. Yeah, we should not rush any component of it, because, yeah, there are just a lot of concerns, but I just wanted to thank you for raising those and contributing to this thoughtful discussion, because it's really important.
Thank you. Any further comments or discussion? Seeing none, I think we're ready to take a roll call vote. Do I do the roll call? You can if you'd like. Okay. Let's start with Member Stone.
I vote yes.
Thank you. Member Brown.
I vote yes.
Thank you. Member Lighthouser.
I vote yes.
And Vice Chair Moe. I lost her. I don't see her. Let me see. We seem to have.
She is. She just got back on.
I've been off for some time.
We're doing a roll call vote, and we're ready for your vote. But you did just make us all hold our breath for an extra couple of minutes.
Did I miss anything nice anybody had to say about me?
It was all nice. There, I think we lost her again. Are you back?
Oh, she's frozen.
She's frozen.
Oh, of course.
Dave's over there chuckling. Well, while we're waiting for Mary to become live again, I will vote, and I would like to vote yes also. And we'll see if we can get, is Mary trying to call back in?
At least she froze like that. If it was me, I would have been scratching my ear or my nose.
Right. Or yawning.
Yes.
She just likes to keep us on the edge of our seat. Sure. Well, while we're trying to call Mary, I guess I would just like to once again thank the department. Oh, wait, we have Mary.
I vote aye.
Mary votes aye. Thank you, Mary.
I'll try to get back.
There you are again. All right, motion carries. Thank you, all of you. What a great discussion. As I was saying, I really want to thank the department. It was what a wonderful way to meet Kevin. And clearly he's a resource that we're going to lean on and value through this process. And we appreciate all your input, Kevin, and all the agency's efforts to put this together in a very thoughtful way, relatively quickly. And we appreciate that. And we look forward to seeing this project develop. Thank you.
And also a thank you, if I might, Madam Chair, to the Slider family for an incredible donation.
Absolutely. I don't know if the family and the local land trust, I think both should be commended. This creates a really exciting opportunity for everyone, and it's thanks to you that it's even happening. So thank you, and thanks for remembering that, Vice Chair Moe. So our next item is the capital program projects. Do we want to do that next, or do we want to take a little break?
Chairman Grove, I would suggest we take a little break, a 5-minute break.
That would be awesome. Thank you. All right, we'll be back at 11, let's say 11:35.
Where'd everybody go? Erica. Tom, are we recessed for a while or something?
Yes, till 11:35. I can see you, Mary, but I can't hear you.
Thing?
We're recessed till
Huh,
11:35.
Oh, they must have. Okay.
There you're back.
Yes, we took a little break.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
You were frozen, but it was great because you were frozen with this big smile on your face. Chair Grove, you are frozen with a candy bar in your mouth, I believe.
I know.
I'm not sure which is better, the candy bar or Vice Chair Mo's laugh.
That is so funny.
Better.
So when I address the liability issues,
I take the video.
Hang on.
Angie, I hope you're ready for your close-up.
I mean, how funny is that? I get frozen feeding my face. which is actually appropriate. I always have food. Okay, well, now we'll move to the second agenda item. They're a fairly robust first agenda item. And it's our capital program projects from Tom Riley. Tom, thanks for joining us.
Chair Grove, board members, Director Williams, Beth, Tom Riley, Assistant Administrator here at Montana State Parks. For the capital update today, I have two aspects of it. And the first one is the cover sheet, and that's a proposal for 2 new projects of capital investment. And the second part is the capital projects we have in work this year in the summer, and that was a separate list that Colleen sent out independent of the cover sheet. And just a reminder, per statute, any capital expenditure exceeding $50,000, we come to the board for approval to invest the funds. And at this time, we have 2 projects, both in Region 1, and they're to address aging infrastructure. The first is at Lone Pine State Park on the edge of Kalispell. And there we have a well that's about 1,000 feet deep. And then we have a water system in a confined space vault put in the early 80s that's just at the end of its useful life. And we have some anomalies on the water system at Lone Pine, besides the low capacity and very deep well, in the fact that our well and our water system is on separate land, private land, and it also serves 5 landowners independent of the state park. So it's critical that we get this in good shape for the future. And again, we haven't touched this in about 40 years. And we're also going to put in a treatment system, which we have one now that is at the end of its useful life. We've had some engineering consultants look at this over the past year. We've nursed it along for a long time, and it's going to be about $200,000 to get the water system to where it should be. So that is the first project. The second project is at Logan State Park on the Thompson Channel Lakes. And there we have a comfort station in our campground. We have a very nice campground if you haven't been there. It's paved and electrified, and one of our newer comfort stations. And the effluent is collected at the lift station, and then it's pumped under Highway 2 to the drain field on the other side of the highway. And this is a lift station that is just at the end of its useful life with the pumps and controls. We went through one of these system upgrades at Giant Springs a few years ago, and there's somewhat of a package deal with pumps, controls, floats that will pump the effluent across the road to the drain field. And our regional staff has again nursed this one along for a long time, and they reach a point where they're just at the end of their useful life and they just need to be replaced. And my goal is to get these done before the next visitation season. We've talked about the parks visitation this year. These are both integral projects that support public visitation and health and safety. So with that, I will stand for any questions on those 2 proposed capital projects.
Are there any questions from the board? Tom, I have a question on the Lone Pine State Park system. You know, as you pointed out, you share that with 5 residences. So is there a cost sharing component to this? And you know, when you're talking about putting in the new system, are they contributing to that?
Chair Grove, there is an agreement with the landowners that any upgrades would be a shared cost, and we will be pursuing that with the landowners.
And are they aware that we are moving forward with this project?
We've had preliminary talks with them before the COVID hit. So they're not aware that we're moving forward with it right now, but they are aware that it would be moving forward at some point. So we're not going to put any surprises on anybody. We're going to work with an engineering firm and develop the costs and meet with them hopefully in person.
And would these improvements be in place for next season?
Chair Grove, that is my goal, is to have these ready for next season. So we've nursed these two infrastructure projects along for a long time at the regional level, and we don't want them going out July 4th.
Great. And are we going to talk about the other projects you have in each region after this? So because I have some questions about. Okay.
Yes, Chair Grove, yes, that was my plan, is to separate the two new ones as proposed.
Perfect.
And then talk about the other ones separately.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any other questions on these two capital projects? Seeing none, shall we entertain a motion?
Chairman Grove, I move the Parks and Recreation Board approve the expenditure of capital funds for the two proposed infrastructure investments at Lone Pine and Logan State Parks at the estimated amount of $325,000.
Second.
Do you get the second? Mary the second. Thank you. Is there any public comment on the motion?
Chair Grove, members of the board, I'm seeing none.
Thank you, Katie. Is there any further board discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Everyone.
I forgot to unmute and I did say aye. Sorry.
Thanks, Betty. Thank you.
Chair Grove, I'll just pick it up there with your second question here. The board received a separate list of state parks capital projects from Colleen, and there's about 25 projects listed here. I didn't list all 50 to 60 that we have in work that include tree trimming and replacing a section of sidewalk. I listed the major ones statewide that are either complete or in work or various, bidding phases. Some of the highlights I'll just touch on, Chair Grove and members of the board, is our Makoshika Waterline project is in work right now. That is bringing water from the city of Glendive approximately a mile inside the park for the benefit of future development there. We have a project at Anaconda Stack with Northwestern Energy and a local electrical contractor to bring in about 3/4 of a mile of new overhead power line to the stack lighting. The existing infrastructure was, I don't even know how old. I wouldn't even guess, but it's at the state of failure. So we have that in work. We did a new ramp upgrade at Logan State Park this year. And then we have a new project getting underway at Milltown State Park on the edge of Missoula that involves a trailhead development project, includes LWCF, a grant from Missoula County, and some other funding sources. And those are somewhat the larger ones. So with that, I think if Chair Grove, if you or any board members have questions on specific ones, that's probably the most beneficial use of our time.
Vice Chair Moe.
Thank you. Mr. Riley, I'm interested in the Rosebud Battlefield. Can you tell me what you've done to the parking area there?
Vice Chair Moe, yes, we don't have the project bid yet, but the project is to develop a parking area that will accommodate people that arrive in a bus or arrive, like say, towing a camper or camp trailer, things of that type, so they can get parked and turned around and out. And then we
Would that require changing the road? Because my memory is it's kind of narrow getting in there.
Vice Chair Moe, no, it does not involve any road improvements outside of the park proper. Those are on private land, and we would have to work with the family there, the landowner, and we're not proposing that right now.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Yeah, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I have a question on Anaconda Stack State Park. Is the electrical upgrade a part of a larger infrastructure project? And are there opportunities with working with Northwestern Energy to cost share? How is that agreement structured?
Member Lighthizer, at this time, no, it's just a fee. We paid Northwest Energy to put in new overhead power poles and lines. And what this project will do, this will set the stage for replacing the stack lighting at some point in the future. That stack lighting is decades old, and it's basically what was in place in 1986 when we took over the stack. So there's a lot of new lighting technology, great advancements made both in light and energy efficiency, and that would be the next phase at some future point. But the current project is just to get the electricity to the base of the stack and have it reliable. And again, this has been one of my projects that I've wanted to get done for a lot of years, because if the lights ever go out on the Anaconda Stack, we're all going to be scrambling to get it fixed because of the FAA requirements. So this will assure we have a safe infrastructure for the next phase, which would be the lighting.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Tom, I have a question. As you know, one of my favorite things is bike camps.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering, we have in the past talked about bike camps, both at Lewis and Clark Cavern State Park. And also I would like, of course, to see one at our local park here in Helena. Do you have any plans for bike camps or timelines for at either one of those locations or in the future?
Chair Grove, at this point, we're going to be assembling our list for the next round of major maintenance projects, and those would fit into, into one of those things. So yeah, that would be the next step, is to get it on a list and move forward that way.
Is that for this biennium or next biennium?
It would be for next biennium.
Starting in July?
It would be it'd be for money after the session, so yes.
Thank
But
you.
we typically work on the planning through the winter because there isn't much that can get constructed over the winter season.
But right now, there's no plans for any bike camps.
At this point, Chair Grove, there isn't, but we could certainly discuss that some more.
We certainly could.
Agreed. Thank you for bringing that up, Chair Grove.
I'd also just like to highlight the Makoshika Waterline project. That's a really exciting opportunity that came up during the last session. And just remind the board at a future date, we're going to have to see what we can do about getting a campground at the end of that water line, because was kind of the opportunity for that. So in the future, we need to start thinking about how we can get a campground to connect to that water line. And I'm anticipating that water line will be done prior to next season. Is that correct, Tom?
Chair Grove, yes. The basic infrastructure will be done before Christmas this year, which is all the boring and the open cut excavations. And then they'll set the pump station when the weather breaks in the spring, and it will be ready April timeframe, I suspect.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, great. Well, thanks. Great work, Tom. Looks like there's going to be some fun things happening in the state parks here in the near future.
Yep, thank you.
All right, our next agenda item is Missouri Headwaters State Park Planning Update from Betsy LeBrod. And I just wanted to explain that I asked for this to be on the agenda because the last time we met in person, which seems like years ago, was in March. And we actually went to this site and visited it and heard, kind of initial steps. So I thought it was time for us to follow up on that and see what was happening. So with that, Betsy, can you let us know what's happening with Missouri River Headwaters State Park?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Grove. And good morning, board members.
My name is Betsy Labrod. That's LA capital BROAD. And I am the Regional Park Manager for Region 3 out of the Bozeman office. And I am going to take 30 seconds here to switch over to the sharing of the screen. Stop video. Let's see. Sorry about this. I'm a little slow on this. All right. Slideshow from the beginning. All right, thank you for being patient. All right, so thank you again, Madam Chair, board members, and Director Williams for allowing me to present a short overview of the master plan project for the Missouri Headwaters State Park. This is an exciting project that will showcase much of what Montana State Parks has to offer. Within the boundaries of the scenic park and National Historic Landmark, the Jefferson, Madison, and Gallatin rivers merge to form the 2,300-mile-long Missouri River. Many of you are familiar with the layout of the park, either from personal visits or from the tour of the park that Chairman Grove mentioned that we had this past spring. Just for your information, the photo on the top right is the Gallatin City Hotel, which we believe is the oldest hotel in the Gallatin County area. And then on the bottom right is the 2020 first day hike at the park, where we had many participants, including 2 goats. So it's definitely a well-loved park, even all around the calendar year. Let's see. So basically, we decided that a park master plan was needed for the park. So a park master plan is the roadmap that guides every phase of parks management, from the design to programming and into maintenance. Successful master plans are based on thorough, accurate research and maximize community involvement in the decision making. All 4 steps are critical to ensuring the project is successful. During these first 3 steps, reviewing the existing conditions, analyzing needs and preferences, and developing a prioritized action plan, where the focus is on conducting a thorough inventory and analysis of the conditions in the park as it stands now. These conditions are being compiled from site visits, previous plans, community comments, and existing data sources and services that we already have. This analysis will provide a baseline for park improvement efforts. The master plan will build upon the exhaustive work that has gone into the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, the park strategic plan update, the Missouri Headwaters State Park Foundation document, and the work completed during the Governor's Initiative on Parks in Focus. The fourth step, adopting and implementing the plan, will be presented as a phased approach, taking into consideration safety, legislative, financial, and environmental conditions and constraints. The master plan describes what is there today, what the possibilities are for the future, and what the site.
Lost her.
Betsy, we cannot hear you.
I'm looking at what the meeting showing.
Betsy, are you out there?
Looks like she just dumped off.
Can you hear me, Mary? So Betsy's the only one I don't see anyone else on the meeting either.
Betsy just dropped off.
Okay. Should we go to the next agenda item? Or should we?
I'm trying to call her right now.
So we might as well go with Kobe. Don't worry about what we'll do for last.
While we're working out the technical difficulties with Betsy, shall we just move to the last but certainly not least agenda item that we have on our agenda today, which is an update from the Montana State Parks Foundation. And we're super excited to have Kobe here. We haven't had you at one of our meetings for a while, Kobe. So thank you for joining us today. And we're looking forward to hearing from you.
I am back. I just don't know where I lost you.
Well, I think what we're going to do, Betsy, is we're going to do the Montana State Parks Foundation update, and then we'll come back to you.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Hello, everyone.
Hello, Kobe.
Okay. Madam Chair, directors or board members, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I've got just some photos to go along with the content that I plan on talking about, so bear with me for a moment.
Can I stop?
Sorry. All right. Okay. Let's see. Should be screen sharing here now. Let me know. Maybe there's the screen.
Betsy, are you still screen sharing?
No.
Oh, now we have Kobe.
Okay.
We see.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and present. Okay. So like I said, just some slides. And I did want to preface that it's been about 1.5 years since I last presented to the Parks Board. So pleasure to be back. I've been at most of the meetings since then. And you can probably tell the hair's a little bit longer since March, but always good to be back. And I'm actually, as I mentioned earlier, on the shores of Flathead Lake today. So if my internet cuts out, I really apologize, but I'll try to keep my presentation brief, as I know you guys have all absorbed a lot of information today. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what we've been able to do in the recent past. What you're looking at photo-wise is our incompleted but nearly complete shade shelter at the lower entrance to the caverns at Lewis and Clark Caverns. This photo was taken in April, just as the project was nearing completion. And you can see the basic layout of the structure that allows people to gather underneath it and allows the tour guides to orient folks before taking them into the Paradise Room or the last room of the typical caverns tour. This year, being a very unique year, we got this done in late April, and it turned out to be the only tour that was offered of the caverns this year. And over 12,400 people ended up taking that tour. So even in its very first year, the impact of this shade shelter was very big. We hope that it will continue to have big impacts in the park, not only in terms of tours, but also we donated the value of this shade shelter and its design to Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks as consideration for match to develop a bike camp down below in the larger campground. So I do hope that Tom Riley was incorrect in saying that there were no bike camps planned, because that was the intent when we developed and donated this shelter. So we also completed a pretty robust project at Wild Horse Island this last year. It took us about 2 years of summer work out at Wild Horse Island to do a bunch of habitat restoration, rebuilding the 6 landing sites around the island, and maintaining the 3 miles of trail on the island, as well as rebuilding a little bit of it. That project was a really great collaboration of ourselves and a bunch of funders and the Montana Conservation Corps. And it was unique in that, state parks are almost always seen as recreation-focused areas. In this case, we were able to generate funding from not only Montana Recreation Trails Program through a grant, but also from the Wild Sheep Foundation, the Mule Deer Foundation, Onyx Maps, Sportsman and Ski House. And then we used that funding to hire MCC to do the lion's share of the work. So a really nice collaborative mix of the organizations that love and care about the wildlife and habitat, as well as the recreation focused stuff. So unique in state parks, but this was a good example of where we would like to see ourselves in the future. Where are we going in the future? We're talking about alternative lodging at places like Makoshika State Park, where we recently received a $25,000 grant from the Tracy Foundation to develop a yurt or cabin on the bluff overlooking Makoshika State Park. We also want to do something similar at Finley Point State Park in the Flathead Lake State Park complex. This is sort of maybe a view that you might enjoy from the porch on the edge of the Makoshika yurt that we hope to build in the coming year. So the alternative lodging is really kind of a spin-off of what has worked well in other state park systems. Oregon and Utah in particular have done a fantastic job of developing visitor amenities that are not just tent sites or RV pads. And that's drawn in a whole new group of people that want to visit these parks. So Ecola Beach or Ecola State Park in Oregon has a yurt system that is at capacity for nearly 6 months of the year. The state of Utah is experimenting with everything from covered wagons to glamping style wall tents at their parks. So we see this as a good opportunity to test whether or not alternative lodging can work in Montana. And if it can, will it generate more revenue than it takes to maintain it? We also do a lot in communications. And this year in particular, we have really tried to step up and help Pat Doyle and the folks in FWP's communications departments inform the public about what they're going to see when they get to the park. In March and April, when parks were, nobody knew what was happening, national parks were shutting their gates, recreation areas on US Forest Service and BLM land were shutting down, state parks remained open. And we helped communicate that and then built into that a campaign about responsible recreation, where we talked about social distancing, mask wearing, leave no trace, and generally trying to make a very minimal impact on the parks, because those were the only places that remained open, but were under a considerable strain. So we actually started this program that I illustrated here, a buy one, give one for our masks that we sell. So every mask that we sell, we ship a mask to folks at state parks. So if you're interested, if you don't have masks, if you want a better one that looks better, come check out our website. I wanted to give just a quick look at our revenue and what we've been able to do in recent years. And you have my annual report, and this is included in that, so you can dig deep into the numbers. But in our last fiscal year, we brought in about $260,000, which, for context, when I came in and started my first year in 2017, 2018, was only 142. So that's considerable rise in revenue, and we will absolutely fly right past that in this fiscal year that we're in right now. You can also see where we spent where we got our money. 31% of that came from grants. License plate sales contributed about 20%, and then 19% from individual giving. So very important resources for us. The individual giving is one that we are really focused on trying to grow. Along with revenue increasing, expenditures have increased. And I want to point out that, in 2017, we spent about $128,000. And this past year we spent, a little over $170,000. So those are increasing, and those costs are actually increasing in our impacts directly in parks. Our operations costs have actually decreased as we've been able to streamline some of the services that we pay for. So happy to dig into that at the end if anyone's interested. I'm sure what you guys are actually waiting to hear from me is about Fort Owen. And when I was asked to present, I didn't know if I was going to actually get to talk about this, because the information was embargoed until our grant partner approved a press release that went out earlier this week. But I'm happy to report that we were successful in securing a $507,500 grant for project work at Fort Owen. That will effectively double the size of the state park by purchasing additional acreage, improving the access by widening the road, improving the fencing. It'll pay for the development of a parking area where buses and RVs can get in and get turned around. It will also completely rethink and redo the interpretive plan for that park. So the first thing we'll do is pay for, the property acquisition, but then we'll start looking into the archaeology of the place and getting a good sense of what's really there and how we can tell a more holistic story interpretive wise about this park. So it's multifaceted. There's a lot of great stuff, and a huge thank you to the Helmsley Charitable Trust who funded this, the grant that we got. But there's also funding from the Friends of Fort Owen in $25,000 for the roof on the East Barracks. There's potential funding through the Historic Society for additional historic preservation at Fort Owen. So again, a number of different partners and players involved in this. And I think the more that we have, the better. So, in the top right corner of this photo that may be covered up by your Zoom interface is the park. It is surrounded by a ranch, a private ranch for anyone that hasn't been there. This is, in a lot of ways, meant to not only improve the park, but keep the good relationship that's only recently been established with that neighboring landowner, keep it in great shape. And I think in doing this, we'll achieve a lot of simultaneous goals. We're also interested in helping where we can and appropriately with the Summers Beach acquisition. We really value Flathead Lake and access to it and recognize how scarce that is. And however this process plays out, know that we're a willing participant and here to support Montana State Parks and FWP throughout. We have the Flathead Action Fund already established in order to help out with this sort of thing. We envision any challenge grant that we would receive being applied to the Flathead Action Fund, and the funds that we currently hold in there, a little over $20,000, would go toward that purpose as well. So know that we feel like we already have the vehicle in place to help as soon as help is needed. And we also have a similar fund for Southeast Montana, and we've driven considerable donations to that fund. We hold just under $10,000 there right now. And we see a lot of opportunities with that, whether it's a pedestrian and biking trail connecting the town of Pryor to Chief Plenty-Coup State Park. We used it recently to repair a fish cleaning station at Tongue River Reservoir, or bigger, more grandiose visions like new state parks along the Yellowstone River. These are all ideas that are out there and we're tracking and willing to take part in if and when it becomes appropriate. So those are a lot of what we have going on. I'm very happy to try to answer any questions or dig deeper into the numbers if you choose to.
Thank you, Kobe. That's super exciting. And I know the board is very excited as well. So I have several comments, but I think we'll start with other board members. Any comments for Kobe?
Chairman Grove.
Vice Chair Mo.
Excellent presentation, and just so exciting to see all that you're doing, Kobe. I'm very excited, especially with your announcement about Fort Owen. That is wonderful to have that level of funding to reward really the efforts of locals and of yourself to take an underused and sort of fading resource and revitalize it. So that is tremendously exciting. Thank you.
Thank you for your kind words, Member Mo.
Any other comments? Member Lightheart.
Yeah, thank you for the excellent presentation. And I really want to highlight and and appreciate your emphasis on telling a more holistic story of the archaeology. And I just really hope to see, I'm excited to see that unfold and learn more about the history of the park.
Well, I hope we come across some really significant findings and have a good plan to share that with the public. So thank you, Member Lighthizer.
I'm actually excited about the year at Makoshika, so I hope that project materializes, and I'll be looking forward to that view.
Wasn't that a fantastic slide?
Yeah.
Is the reservation system open yet? Because I'd like to reserve a couple of nights right now.
Wait your turn.
I'll leg wrestle you for it. Any other comments? Member Brown?
I'll just say good work, Kobe, for done and what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kobe, and I just wanted to also thank you for your patience on us trying to figure out how this process works and how we make you a useful partner. I know that's been frustrating for you, and for all of us just trying to figure it out. It's been hard, but it's obviously been quite fruitful. I just want you to know through this whole meeting, my phone has been lighting up all day about Fort Owen. So as you know, I have family in Stevensville, so they're just a little excited. And then I'm also hearing from members of the Friends of Fort Owen group. I remember when I first became chair, we went over and had a meeting with that group who hadn't even formulated yet. They were still drawing up their paperwork and trying to decide what they could do for that state park. And to look back on that and see where we are now is just truly a testimony to the commitment of organizations like yours and the Friends groups, and what can happen when we all
Oh no.
Vice Chair Mo.
Seems to be a rotating freeze going on.
Vice Chair Mo, Chair Grove, if you can hear, and members of the board. I can't tell you how big of a relief it was to land this grant. You know, we've been working on this Fort Owen process behind the scenes for some time, and it's just a tremendous win for the foundation and for parks. And I really am looking forward to the next 2 years. Are going to be a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of effort and dedication from myself, as well as staff at Fish, Wildlife, and Parks and the contractors that we end up hiring. But the transformation that will take place in the next 2 years will be remarkable. And to echo Chair Grove's remarks, when I first started in this position over 3 years ago, I went down and visited with the non-incorporated Friends of Fort Owen group, and they asked about everything from fiscal sponsorship to giving them some money to resolve conflicts with the previous landowner. The situation looked beyond hopeless. It looked like there was just no good answer in that whole deck of cards. And we, you know, so many circumstances had to change in order for this to work, and so many good things had to happen in order for us to land this grant. So a huge thanks to all the state parks and FWP staff that helped in formulating the budgets and the grant narrative and everything else that went into it. And again, it's going to be a tremendous amount of work, but I think the outcomes will be remarkable.
And what is the name of that Flathead Lake group that you mentioned in your slide?
That is our Vice Chair Mo, that is our Flathead Action Fund. And we established that fund as a means to address urgent and ongoing park issues in the Flathead Lake region.
Yeah. We've been dealing with acronyms so heavily today that I could not resist the slogan, "Give me some flack."
That might be a good t-shirt. Kobe, could you talk a little bit about what our time frame is for spending this grant?
Yes, Chair Grove, members of the board, upon receiving funding, which is imminent at this point, we have 24 months to complete the project at Fort Owen. So, early snow is going to challenge us with the cultural resource survey right out of the gate. But I think significant progress can be made. The Fort Owen property acquisition is set to close next week, as I understand it. So we'll be spending this money right out of the gate, and it'll be a pretty full-on project in the next couple of years. Obviously, on the ground work is going to have to wait until spring for the most part, but the park has been closed to visitors so that this work can occur.
Thank you. So I hope that in the near future, when this grant is completed and this exciting work is done, we can actually have a face-to-face, maybe a social distancing, but at least a face-to-face gathering in that parking lot to celebrate your efforts, because this is definitely worth celebrating. So thank you. Thank you so much. And have a great day. And I like the COVID haircut. That's good. Okay.
Can I ask one more quick question on
Sure.
this? Is there any, it's just a tremendous opportunity and grant. And I was just curious if there's lessons learned through this process that you think other parks could take advantage of. Because having that outside funding is such a tremendous opportunity. I don't know if there was something, was it just the timing, because we already had focused on Fort Owen in the past meetings. I mean, what do you think was one of the catalysts that could be possible to learn from, for other parks to learn from that experience?
Yes, Chair Grove, Member Lighthizer. I don't want to equate this to catching lightning in a bottle. This was a long relationship building process that got us to this point. The folks at the Helmsley Charitable Trust and I have been in communication since early spring of 2019. So going on 2 years here in a few months. So a lot of it is relationship building, but these large opportunities aren't always going to be there. The big funder who wants to write the big check for a single project and doesn't expect a match is rare. And it's important to recognize that. But it's also important to recognize that having a plan, even far-fetched blue sky best case scenario plan, is important, because without that, there's nothing to fund. Without a vision, without a plan, without something out there that you can point to and say that we can make a real change here, there's simply nothing to fund, and there's not even an ask to make.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying. I appreciate that.
Yep.
I think that it really highlights the need for planning and being in a position to take advantage of any opportunity that presents itself. And Kobe was jumped on it. He did a good job of that. So does anybody have any further questions? But it does lead into us going back to state parks planning at Headwaters State Park. And I think you did a nice job of emphasizing the need for that, Kobe. So thank you, and enjoy Flathead Lake. And we look forward to seeing what exciting things come out of your projects. Bye. Okay, do we have Betsy back?
Yeah, can anybody give me an idea of what was the last thing you heard me say, or what picture was up?
I think we were on.
We were on that 4 point. You were just on the final point.
Okay, excellent. Let me go ahead and bring this back up again. Slideshow. Why is it not doing? There we go. Beginning. And then, all right. All right, so you might hear a little bit of repeating, but I will go on from here. There are generally 4 steps in developing a master plan, and all 4 steps are critical to ensuring the project is successful. During the first 3 steps, the focus is on conducting a thorough inventory and analysis of conditions in the park as it stands now. sorry about that. These conditions are being compiled from site visits, previous plans, community comments, and existing data sources and services. And this analysis will provide a baseline for park improvement efforts. The master plan will build upon the exhaustive work that has gone into the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, the park's strategic plan update, the Missouri Headwaters State Park Foundation document, and the work completed during the governor's initiative of Parks in Focus. The fourth step, adopting and implementing the plan, will be presented as a phased approach, taking into consideration safety, legislative, financial, and environmental conditions and constraints. The master plan describes what is there today, what are the possibilities for the future, and what the site can sustainably maintain. Right. Our public meeting objectives, a public engagement plan will be developed to identify who to involve, how to conduct outreach, and when public participation opportunities should occur throughout the planning process. A mix of engagement opportunities, for example, virtual public meetings, online surveys, websites, and other social media will be used to provide optimal public involvement in the planning process. Hopefully, the coronavirus pandemic will recede enough to allow for public meetings and open houses next year. Public involvement is a fundamental part of the master planning process that should be documented and incorporated into all the steps of the master planning process. Oh, still there, good. The master planning team includes both a working group and a focus group. The makeup of each group highlights a cross-divisional representation along with members of the community who possess a strong interest in the natural, cultural, and recreational possibilities of Missouri Headwaters State Park. The working group is providing the heavy lifting of the first 3 steps of the planning process. So, okay, and the focus group members, as the plan progresses, the working group will check in with the focus group for the assistance in reviewing written portions of the plan, reviewing timelines, making suggestions, and maintaining the readability and the comprehension of the master plan. I'm sorry about that. The highlights. As you can see from this abbreviated timeline, there's much that needs to be done to create a highly effective master plan. A more detailed timeline is available outside of this presentation, and I'm happy to mail that off to anybody. In general, what we're looking at during this process is a December kickoff meeting. I'm not really sure what we should call it in the virtual world, but it's a very common tool to let the folks know in the community what we're doing and upfront so that they have an idea and understanding of what the project is. So we'll have a December kickoff. In March, we'll host a scoping meeting. And the May, we'll probably have another scoping meeting at about a 90% rate for the plan. All right, this last slide here shows some wonderful aerial photography that we have had done in-house, and along with that first slide that gave you a great overview of the park as a whole. So basically, the Parks Division as a whole has been engaged in creating foundation documents for all parks statewide. This master plan can serve as a template for future state park master planning efforts. Under the parks classification system, Missouri Headwaters State Park is currently classified as a core park. Completing a master plan for this park allows us to look at all the experiences, heritage, natural, and recreational, while staying true to the purpose and intent of why the park became part of the Montana State Park system. In summary, I want to mention that as a member of the Montana State Parks team, I'm excited to be engaged in this planning effort. And if there are any questions, I will do my best to answer.
Thank you, Betsy. can we leave screen share, or do we need to keep the slides
Well,
up?
I didn't know if anybody wanted to see any slide, but I'll be happy
Right.
to, yeah.
Does
I'll-
anybody need to see any of the other slides before we? Well, let's just open it up to questions. Does anyone have any questions for Betsy? I can't see anyone, so.
There we
Member
go.
Lighthizer?
There
Yes.
we go.
Betsy, can you just clarify kind of where we're at right now? Or
Oh, yes. Absolutely. In the more detailed timeline, it breaks it down into a lot of steps. And in September, we started the process originally as you mentioned earlier, Chairman Grove, in the spring, we started by having a field visit to the park. And then things got crazy, and we've circled back around. We started in September, early September, developing the team, developing the working group, discussing some subcommittee duties for kind of dividing and conquering of the research that we are currently doing into land use, an inventory of the resources in the current, what are the current conditions? And that was pretty much our start in September, and we're beginning to branch out into reviewing a lot of the databases and things that are out there. And we are looking now towards developing a communication and outreach plan so that we can start gathering comments and thoughts about the project. And so we're moving into that, and I feel that we have started. It's a big project, so it's definitely complicated, and we are we've had about 3-4 meetings now with the working group, and people are starting to get traction. We've developed an outline for the project, for the plan itself, an outline, and we're just, our goal is to have a finalized plan approved by the end of June. Actually, I'm aiming for June 1st, just so I can give myself, give us, our team a couple of weeks, lag time in case we have a few things that we need to change. So that's, does that pretty much answer your question, Chairperson, Board Member Lighthizer?
Yeah, it does. I think I've done my best to engage a little bit through the process of the working group. And I think Betsy's right. This is a really complex planning process. And as Kobe aptly pointed out in the last presentation about how important plans are. And it just seems, and I think Betsy also mentioned, this could be a template for other master plans at other state parks, but it seems like we could use some more overall agency participation in this process, at least from my perspective, in order to sort of outline what should be part of the master plan. I think we're doing a lot of work on the foundation documents that are being developed for every state park. So is that inserted in it? Is that the foundation of it? Can we just amplify and continue to build on the foundation documents that creates a template for future master plans? I think I'm just a little bit, it seems like, we've got some great knowledge and very dedicated people that are participating in the process, volunteers. But I just, I feel like there could be potentially some more, I guess, guidance from a state level as to what should be part of this plan. And, just seeing through the SCORP process, how how tremendous that facilitation and partnership with University of Montana was. And I don't know, it seems as though there's a lot of expertise that we can rely on potentially outside of the state park system that might help offer support for this, because it seems like a really big project. I don't really think I didn't frame that as a question at all, but I don't know if Betsy, if that brings anything to mind for you.
Thank you for the question. I'm going to defer to Beth or Ken on the planning templates, the suite of templates that we've developed or was developed by Contractor for the agency. Ken, Beth?
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair Grove and Member Lighthizer. I'll try to do my best to respond to some of those suggestions and points that you just brought up, and some really valid ones for sure. And something that we also are really trying to get a better handle on is just updating our state park plans. And I will say, in reviewing all of the state park plans that are in existence already, just a reminder to the board and whoever is listening in that we do have a whole page dedicated on our website, on our state parks website, to the planning unit, the planning arm of state parks. And within that, you'll see that we currently have 17 existing management plans in place, especially for those parks that would fall in the enhanced and some of the core categories within our classification framework. Then there are always a whole lot of other types of plans, and we have a myriad of those across our state park system. That might be a trails plan that's very specific to a particular park, such as perhaps Lewis and Clark Caverns or Makoshika. We also at times have interpretive plans, like we just talked about. Kobe was mentioning at Fort Owen, and we'd like to really get a much more updated interpretive plan at Fort Owen. There are at times maintenance plans. So this one is a little bit different and unique, and I applaud Betsy in her just thoughtfulness and really trying to think about what is the right type of plan for Missouri Headwaters State Park, knowing that we just had this legislation in the 2019 session that removed it from the Permanent Parks Act, and to be very thoughtful in how to engage this broad array of constituents that we want to make sure that we are engaging with. And so I think that the master plan seems to make good sense for Missouri Headwaters. But I also want us to point to the foundation documents, like you just mentioned, Member Lighthizer, and I completely agree also with Kobe's statements earlier that if we don't have good plans in place, we can't point to them to engage with some of those partners, some of those external funding sources that he might be able to try and be successful with. And so completely agree. It all goes back to planning in the beginning and at the end. As far as the foundation documents, I mentioned in my administrator report last month that we are in the stage of producing a foundation document for every state park in our system. And so we are in the current process of, we are working with the University of Montana, actually with that, we are contracting with them to help provide some consistency and editing assistance. So once you see a Montana State Park Foundation document, you will know that it's a Montana State Park Foundation document because there's consistency across our system. We are in the process of developing the core components of a foundation document. And what that entails is it includes the park's significance, the purpose of its existence, the classification, where it falls in those categories, the description of the park, its fundamental resources and values, and any other important resources, laws, special policies that might pertain. So it's kind of the bare bones, if you will, of that particular state park. In order to put some real meat on the bones of that planning document, that's what we're calling the dynamic component. We will move into the dynamic component process for every state park again, next year is our ideal timeline. And this will include special mandates or agreements, perhaps with a friends group, perhaps with the State Parks Foundation. It depends. Might be a lease arrangement like the Army Corps of Engineers or DNRC, some of those types of situations. Identification of issues, challenges, or opportunities. So this is that SWOT analysis that I talked about last month. And then it will also list all of the existing plans for that particular park, as well as assessing any future data gathering, research, and planning needs. So that's when we'll really start to define, okay, at Cooney State Park, we know that we need to update the trails plan or the overall management plan because it hasn't been updated, I think, since 2008. And so Cooney's ripe because it's been over 10 years to update the management plan. That's just one example. And so part of this also plays into how we best work across the agency as well, and trying to really think about our planning efforts more from a broader recreational perspective, a biological resource perspective as well, and trying to better engage with our responsive management unit that has planning staff available. And so Cayenne, our Parks and Recreation planner, has been working extensively with the responsive management unit planners, bringing them into the fold, probably better than I've ever seen in years past. And so we are trying to reach to other resources, not only within the agency, but then I'll just end with saying that at times we also, I think, do need to consider when do we need to actually contract out some of this work? Because, Betsy has a full-time job as a regional park manager and a whole lot of staff underneath her. And here she is just trying to absorb this duty as assigned, if you will, this planning effort. And thankfully she has planning in her background, so it's not this huge lift for her. But oftentimes, Cayenne is only one, and they also have, so it's a capacity issue a little bit too, but just know we are very dedicated to additional planning efforts, especially as we move towards trying to finalize some of our classification implementation work, if that's helpful.
Yeah, that's tremendously helpful. I think that's my concern, is just capacity in terms of Betsy and all the team. And, this is not something, it's wonderful she has it in her background, but without, if you're not doing this all the time, there's probably some efficiencies that are lost. And she has so much other stuff to do. And then Cayenne too, I think the, tremendous work that she produces. And I'm just really excited about all the planning efforts across the agency. So just trying to think about, capacity and not overburdening. And, sometimes it's also, I've participated in these processes through growth policies and trails master plans and that kind of thing. And it's sometimes nice to have a outside perspective, a third party view that sort of helps you structure it. And then the staff, the people on the ground, those who are closest to the landscape can infuse that document with all the meat, I guess, but it's sometimes helpful to have that third party. So thank you for mentioning that about capacity, because that was a concern that I had.
Any other questions or comments? I have a couple.
Okay.
Well, one of the reasons I asked for this to be on the agenda is I'm disappointed and frustrated that there hasn't been more progress made on this. And I think what Erica is alluding to is, I think from a board's perspective, it's difficult to tell who's driving this bus and who's managing the planning processes. I think Beth did a great job of explaining from the overall division perspective, but who is really helping with these individual park plans? And if it really takes us 2 years just to initiate a process, we are going to be in deep trouble trying to get some of these other ones done. And as Beth pointed out, we have other ones that are ripe for new plans as well. I know, in addition to Cooney, there's also Smith River. Bannock may be another site that we need to look at in Region 3, for example, or Makoshika, as we start looking at talking about campgrounds and those kind of things. So I think we really need to look at this process and see how it's managed and get it operating. And I recognize this is probably the test tube baby, or just trying to figure out how this process works. But it seems to be unclear on like who is really driving the planning conversation, both from the Helena regional and individual park management level. And I think there needs to be attention paid to the fact that we need a process that works fairly efficiently and smoothly in the future so that we can get some of these plans in place. And certainly we will have to prioritize some of those so that when we do have opportunities such as we're seeing at Fort Owen, that some of these amazing state parks that we have in Region 3, for example, we can seize those opportunities. So I think it's important for us to kind of keep this conversation going about planning. I think one of the other reason I wanted this on the agenda is during the next legislative session, there may be questions on what our progress has been made on this project, since it was a big park discussion item last time. And I'm not sure what answer we can give yet. So I think, obviously it's a work in progress. So I just wanted you to understand that that's kind of what I'm looking for. And I think in the future, as we move forward, we're going to be emphasizing park planning and what does this vision mean. And I thank Erica, Member Lighthouser, for being part of the focus group on this one, because I think we are going to have opportunities in the future to have more planning happening. So I hope we keep this moving forward, and I hope we can make this a world-class park, because Headwaters is truly an amazing site. So I'm looking forward to seeing the final product. Thank you.
Chairman Grove, thank you for your comments. I will just tell you that I own the fact that this ended up being a 5 to 6 month delay. I lost 3 family members in the last 6 months. So it's just been one of those things that it was my fault for not handing it off or figuring out another way to deal with this. And so right now at the pace we're set, and I've talked to Ken and Beth about this, and I will defer it to them in a second if they have any comments. And is that we're now moving forward at a pace that should bring us by the end of the year. We definitely had a goal by the time the legislative session started, though we couldn't have a project completed for them, that we would have definitely been through the first 2 of the 4 steps. And we will have had we will have shown them that we've had public engagement. We'll show them that we have a significant outline of the plan. And so, and there are other things, but yeah, we're definitely by the end of December of this year that we will have been able to illustrate that we have had some movement. And then, and I'm pretty confident that our June, to have by the end of this fiscal year, to have a plan in place. I'm pretty comfortable with that, that timeline. I know it seems rushed, but a lot of the harder heavy lifting is right now. It's researching, it's developing, I've already talked to Beth and Ken about, and Cayenne about, utilizing the ITRR group up in Montana to do surveys, online surveys, phone surveys, website surveys. So now that we're starting, and I apologize, I own what I did. And so I just want to assure that it's not going to be forgotten or put aside like that again.
Thank you, Betsy. I appreciate that. And I'm sorry to hear about your family situation. And we're excited to see what the outcome is. Like you said, I think now that we're on track, it'll be fun to see where it lands. Is there any additional comments from the board or questions? Seeing none, thank you, Betsy. Hope you have a nice rest of your day. And sorry we had to delay you there, but
no worries.
all right, thank you for your time. So the only other issue we have on our agenda is public comments for issues not on this agenda. And I'll just defer to Katie to let me know if we have any public out there that would like to make some comments to the board.
Chair Grove, members of the board, I'm seeing none.
Thank you, Katie. Okay, I guess this is it for 2020. I appreciate you guys. I hopefully you guys have a great fall, and I've missed you guys. I hope we get to see each other face to face someday. And thanks for a great meeting today. I think you guys did awesome. Wait, Vice Chair Mo has a comment.
Thank you, and I'm just exhausted. I think I underestimated how much effort we were all putting into that particular agenda item. But I didn't want the occasion to go by without mentioning to Beth my continued interest in dual or multiple naming for the state parks. And when you were going through that list of kind of a format for each one, if we could have also on that list the indigenous peoples that were associated with that park and what their names were, that would be interesting, I think.
Yeah, Chair Grove, Vice Chair Mo, if I might just respond really quick. And I know Chair Grove, you and I have talked a little bit about trying to have Rachel Reckon back in front of the board in the near future, whenever the next board meeting might be. I know that's kind of one of those outstanding items that need to be addressed at some point, but I do think it would be great to have a cultural program update from Rachel to the board again, especially in regards to some of that tribal consultation work that she is doing. We also have the tribal work group that is a broader agency tribal working group that is pulled together of different divisions and units and regions that are all represented. And so, yeah, I think that we can absolutely provide an update at the next board meeting in regards to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair Mo, for bringing that up. And it occurs to me, I thought it would be, especially when we can gather again in one place, important to potentially do a land acknowledgement at the beginning of our board meetings. We do the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and I just think it's really important to potentially incorporate that into our acknowledgement of a place, especially when we're gathered together. So I want to potentially consider that in the future.
Great idea.
Great idea. Thank you, Member Lighthizer. Any other comments from the board?
Chair Grove, if I might just add, I just want to say thank you for the very thorough deliberation today. And I agree, it kind of felt like an endurance race this morning, but just want to say thank you for all of your engagement and input and feedback. It's very helpful and beneficial to all of us that are taking on some of these projects and trying to do our best to provide the services to the public.
Thank you. Betty, did you have another comment?
Well, somewhere I saw a tentative, lost it now. I saw a tentative agenda for next year. Our next meeting scheduled in January. Is that correct, or?
I don't think so. I don't think we have anything scheduled
Okay.
because of the legislative session. But is there an item you wanted to make sure we put on a future list?
No, I just thought I saw something about an upcoming meeting. Obviously, I was mistaken. So
there, yeah, because there will be new leadership probably next year. So we're kind of waiting for some of that. Okay, with all of that, I just want to reiterate what Beth said. Thanks, you guys. Great work today. You were awesome. Thanks for everything you do, and we'll be in touch soon. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.